is up, RotoGrinders? Dean here, Dean78904. If you want to get all technical, we're doing it. We're taking y'all straight up to lock the NFL Week 12 DFS. It is Week 12, right? I should know this. Yes, Week 12, Thanksgiving week. It always sort of throws a curveball. We're always kind of like catching up as far as content and getting getting all up to date. But yeah, 10 gamer, just a 10 gamer. No bye games this week, but obviously the games are played on Thanksgiving. So we have a 10 game slate. It's kind of a haves and have-nots slate with 3 or 4 pretty interesting games and several games that are less appealing. I believe as far as the totals, there's 3 games that have a total of 36 or less. Some quarterbacks that don't look particularly appealing, to some games in general that don't look particularly appealing, and then several that are jumping off the page. Of course, we do live in the world of a salary cap, and some of those are pretty pricey. So we have to talk about and figure out how to make that stuff work outside of, hey, let's play Justin Watson, because that's kind of sort of somewhat uncomfortable. Who's going to help me out with that? Well, it is the People's Show. It's Bobby Gomes, $1 Million winner Bobby Gomes. It's TastefulTides Tim. We're going to be talking you through it. Going to do a little bit of a cash build. We kind of like jump around all over the place as far as the main points of the slate. We do have the chat to help guide us. What's up, chat? Kindly hit that like button. Do subscribe. Do turn on those notifications. We are here for the next hour and 20 minutes until we yield to SquirrelPatrol and Erik Beimfohr. Whatever's on your mind, by all means, throw it out there. As far as players, we're expecting, reports on if they're going to play or they're not going to play. Basically, everything has been solved as far as who's in and who's out. White popped up on the injury report yesterday. He's expected to give it a go, as is Hollywood Brown. Dameon Pierce coming back for Houston as well. Kadarius Toney is out for Kansas City, but there's really not a lot up in the air unless I'm missing something. We're going to bring in TastefulTides. Tim, welcome. Let's bring some energy to the show. It's 9:30 in the morning, 9:35 on the East Coast, 6:35 on the West Coast. Let us know if you're on the West Coast out there in the chat as you're hitting that like button. Tim, how we feeling? Has it been a weird week for you? Like Friday was odd. It felt like a Monday. It's like, oh, you come back and the whole at least my week has been kind of thrown off content-wise and just sports-wise in general.
Yeah, it's definitely been a weird week. Definitely a lot of family stuff going on with Thanksgiving. Kind of threw me off my routine a little bit in terms of research. But I did a lot of catch up last night and this morning. So I've been up for a few hours researching the slate. And, this is definitely a tricky slate, I think, for cash and for GPPs. My first inclination was to go kind of more stars and scrubs. But then also I'm really kind of liking this balanced build approach for cash. So there's really a lot of different ways you can go about it. I don't think there's really any like stone cold, like lock quarterback for cash. I think there's a lot of debate to be had about quarterback, which is kind of interesting. Like a lot of times there's like 1 or 2 guys that we can discuss that are cash game viable. But this week, I think it's very wide open.
Yeah, if salary wasn't a thing, I think you want one of the quarterbacks in the Buffalo-Philadelphia game. But salary, yes, it is a thing. So we'll have that conversation. Bobby, what are we doing today, Bobby? We rolling out a bunch of lineups. We focusing on several. Are there any big million makers out there today? I'm not aware. Like if there's like a big buy-in or just like your sort of standard. What are we looking at? What are our main entries today? What are we focusing on?
Yeah, maxing the 20 and then playing a bunch of the high dollar 3 maxes in a couple single entries. So that's kind of how I'm approaching it. There is a 555 million, I think I have a ticket, but yeah.
So that's 40%, right? 40% up top, 2.5 mil. I think that's what it is, right? I'm seeing.
Yeah, 40% up top.
Yeah, and the 20 is 33% up top. All right, yeah, let's give that a shot. And that's 2 different ways to build, right? Like I think it's you're talking single entry stuff, and then you're talking like basically all or nothing stuff. So you got to have your brain working 2 different ways, I suppose. But yeah, what are your thoughts as far as this slate? What are we seeing? There's some weird chalk. Justin Watson feels kind of uncomfortable, but he's 3K on the biggest team total of the week for Kansas City, but he's not very good, and his targets are not very reliable. He was also kind of terrible last week. Maybe Mahomes is like, I'm going to stop throwing the ball to that dude. But then if not him, who? Greg Dortch? Demario Douglas? Your boy there for New England? Do we even know who's throwing the ball to him? Does it matter? I think you're a big Shaheed guy, if I'm not mistaken. I feel like he's one of your favorite players, though. Michael Thomas, obviously, out there for New Orleans. I guess Perry's another cheapie who may, be interesting, or you're just throwing darts. But yeah, give me the overview, Bobby, because it very clearly, right? Buffalo, Philadelphia, big total. Jacksonville, Houston in a dome, big total. Rams, Arizona, pretty big total in a dome. Kansas City, Vegas, big total, especially on the Kansas City side. And Kansas City mostly not going to get played outside of Pacheco. Should have mentioned, what's the guy's name? McKinnon. McKinnon not playing for Kansas City, so I think Pacheco gets a bump. I think he's going to be pretty popular today. Probably somebody I would throw in my cash lineups today if we're playing cash. But, yeah, and then there's the Pats versus the Giants. Is it 33.5? Is that the total in that game? Is that where it's still out?
That game is so weird to me. I don't know what to do with that game because there's some good value, I think, on the Pats side. But that game is just, I don't know what to do.
There's Stevenson, who, like, if he's dealing with the back, but assuming his back is okay, like, theoretically he's playable. DeMario Douglas, a little bit more money than the cheapies. He's playable. If you want to get weird, and if you want a 3K pivot, and this holds your nose, but like Jalen Hyatt's not completely crazy at 3K still minimum there for the Giants. He could certainly airball, but like he's also a guy that I'm told could hit like a 50-yard catch. And Barkley, who was fabulous last week, but again, the totals 15 team total for the Giants. It is weird that whoever the quarterback is for England's like a 4-point favorite at the Giants this week. But yeah, Bobby, do you kind of see it as kind of the haves and have-nots? Doesn't mean you got to cross games off necessarily, or maybe you do. Maybe you want to do that. Pittsburgh, Cincinnati is another game that has a minute total at 34, 35. Cleveland, Denver, 30, 35, 36. Carolina, Tennessee, which I'm not crossing that game out because I'm buying into the old D. Hember. I think this is the spot. This is the now or never Derrick Henry spot. But yeah, what are you seeing, Bobby, as far as this slate?
You've yet to say the best value play on the slate, Dean. All the projections. You said Greg Dortch. That was the second name you gave.
Who's the best value play on the slate?
It's not hitting projections. It's Khalil Shakir, slot wide receiver for the Buffalo Bills.
Yeah.
He's my favorite. No, but that's the thing about the slate, right? You can come at it from any different angle. If you played cash games today, like Tim said, there's really multifaceted approaches to playing cash games today. It's a good tournament slate. I think it's a good slate overall. We have the two pretty much high total games. We have a couple pace up games and some low totals. But yeah, I like this slate from a tournament perspective. So interested to see how we're going to break down this cash game shell. Because like I said, I think there's a bunch of different ways you can approach it. And then as we build out into tournaments, I'm interested to hear both of your takes.
I like the Shakir call. We'll get into it as far as we're talking about that game. That game is loaded on both sides. Most of it is expensive, but Shakir is a kind of a cheap piece. And we'll put this on layaway. But I'm curious to hear what you have to say about the pride of UCF. Gabe Davis has been scuffling. He's speaking of airballs in 2 of his last 3 games. But look, shout out to UCF. We're going bowling. We took down Chop's Houston Cougars. How about that? Take that, Chopper.
Take that, Chop.
Chop's a big Houston Cougars fan, so he actually wrote up on Scores and Odds UCF minus 13. I was going to DM him, turning on his team, and Houston won by the hook. But no, I'm sorry, UCF covered. So people don't care. I don't know why I'm getting to that, but I'm really curious in your take as far as Gabe Davis, because he feels like an all or nothing guy. That's just
I have this Gabe Davis take. Let me get in my deep research. Gabe Davis.
You're gonna cross him.
Gabe Davis, he stinks. Gabe Davis,
but
he's not.
He has those games, man. Every once in a while, he has those games. He's not in your pool.
No, he's in my pool, but
yeah,
I would prefer obviously Shakir, Diggs, and Kincaid. I think I did a max 2 of those guys in every Allen lineup, so. That's one of the rules I have currently that I made at 3 a.m.
That's the best time. That's when I thrive. 3 a.m. is like my prime lineup building strategy. I don't know about yourself, but that's kind of where I'm at. Tim is making his lineups like 6 o'clock in the morning after like 2 cups of coffee, I imagine. But are we locked in, Tim, or are you still kind of figuring it out as far as your main lineup, your main cash lineup?
We are definitely not locked in. I've never felt less locked in on a slate. I'm pretty sure. So I mean, I gave out a little cash score to the producer Steve before the show. It doesn't even have a quarterback in it because I can't even decide what quarterback I want. So, it's I'm definitely not locked in.
Yeah, producer Steve's going to throw that up on the screen momentarily. We'll show you guys the cash game core, the DK cash game core. One of the ones that's interesting and like it's smashing optimals, and I kind of get it, but also like the matchup's not spectacular, and like he's going to be one of the most popular players in the slate is Jonathan Taylor. I feel like he's supposed to be somebody you're supposed to get away from in tournaments to some degree. I know he separated himself from Moss last time as far as the split. But the matchup there against Tampa Bay known pass funnel. And of course you're playing him in cash, right? Because he's just too cheap considering what his projected, touch total is going to be. But talk about that. Talk about your build. Optimizers are going to give you Jonathan Taylor, the ones that I've ran. I'm running some stuff now as well if anything changes. But and is that something we should get away? I'm going to ask Bobby as far as tournaments. You feel free to talk about it as well, Tim, especially in 3-entry stuff where you focus and where the chalk tends to rise. I think he's an interesting fade in the 3-entry single entry max.
Yeah, I mean, we have projected for 20 rush attempts, which is like way above anybody else other than Josh Jacobs, who's in a tougher matchup. We also have Taylor projected for about 4.5 targets and 28 receiving yards. We have Taylor projected to be in the optimal almost 30% of the time, which is a really, really strong number. Only 35% ownership. So only a little bit of negative leverage there with Jonathan Taylor. I don't necessarily agree with you that he's somebody that we need to be looking at as like bad chalk for tournaments. I actually kind of think that he is good chalk. That's just my opinion. But yeah, he is definitely 100% a cash game play today. He's somebody I would consider, like if I'm playing a 3 max, I would consider playing in all 3. Maybe if I play him 2, then I definitely have Michael Pittman in the other one.
Yeah, I think I'm going to have a piece of Indianapolis in most lineups, I would imagine.
Yeah.
Ownership-wise on DK, Taylor's getting the most ownership by far, 36%. Pacheco at 21%. I personally think that might rise a little bit with the news of McKinnon. Also, they're a 30-point team total, pretty big favorite in a dome there against the Raiders offense. It's not defense, or the offense is bad too, and the Raiders defense we're not necessarily afraid of. Bobby, what's your thoughts as far as Taylor? Is that something you're gravitating to? Is it good chalk or is it sketchy chalk? And the math is great. The math plays out spectacularly, and I agree. He's going to see a ton of touches. I'm trying to find a way to get away from it, and maybe it's a bad idea. Maybe I should just embrace it and get different elsewhere.
So it's funny just how both of you are approaching it. I think it's kind of how the industry's I think the industry's more leaning Dean's way, and I think Tim's way might be the correct side. I simmed pretty much every site's projection last night across the industry, and Taylor was hitting the optimal at the highest clip for the running back position. With Vita Vea there, I'd want to get away from him also. That's kind of why, if you look, Tampa's given 1 rushing touchdown up all season to opposing
0 to running backs. Wait, I thought it was 0. Is it 1? I thought it was 0.
It was 1. Well, either way, 0 or 1.
Yeah, it's not a lot.
So for me, like, I'm currently under the field, but now I'm starting to try to I feel like a lot of people are going to take that similar approach. So I think Tim is making a good point to where you might just play him. But currently I'm under the field. That could change up to lock.
Yeah, but as far as the cash game bill, which we're talking about right now, like Tim, it makes a ton of sense to throw in your cash game lineup. Other pieces you want to talk about in your cash build. So you are embracing the Justin Watson 3K just because it makes everything else work. It looks like feel free talking about that as far as receivers and cash in general. I see you have 2 receivers, Watson and Kirk, and then salary getting opened up. Obviously, you can kind of have some fun with the other pieces, but tell me why those are currently in your lineup.
Yeah, Watson's in my lineup. Both the blitz and our RG projections have him projected for around 9 to 10 points, which is incredible for a 3K player. He got like double-digit targets last game. The Chiefs' wide receiving core is absolutely atrocious. Like, I know that Watson is not good. I'm not going to sit here and say that Watson is a good wide receiver, but at min price, getting the targets that he gets and the salary that he opens up, I think that he's definitely cash game viable. He would be a guy that I would want to be underweight in tournaments because I certainly question his ceiling. Not necessarily somebody that's going to break the slate. But in cash games, and then you see this cash game core that I have, I think it leaves about $6,600 left. You can go several different routes that way with 6,600. You can go another stud, or you can go all balanced with that. Like, you could go like Trevor Lawrence, Pacheco in that QB spot, RB2 spot, and then there's other ways you can go with it. So I like using this shell because you can go different ways, and Watson allows me to do that. I think that this Jacksonville-Houston game is one of the best games on the board, so I absolutely want exposure to it, and I think Kirk is a little bit too cheap for this matchup. So Kirk is definitely going to be in my cash game team.
Yeah, your thoughts on that, Bobby, as far as the Kirk and I guess Watson. Okay, I have not ran the Sims like Bobby at 3 o'clock in the morning or 2 o'clock in the morning, but I'm going to guess, Bobby, that the Sims do not like Watson in tournaments. Like, that seems like something you should absolutely get away from. You tell me otherwise. There's so many other things at 3 or not spectacular. Like, Watson's kind of icky, but there are things that are a little bit more icky. So, like, he kind of rises up just by default, and we'll get into other cheapies. But the Sims are telling you tell me otherwise. I'm guessing that it's probably not the best chalk in tournaments.
Yeah, I'm trying to get away from Watson in tournaments. I think that makes the most sense. Also, it's pretty much where the industry was at. But yeah, in cash games, it makes a ton of sense. Like the Kirk call, like the Houston-Jacksonville game in general for the pace. And I think the Stroud side could be lower owned. So if you're trying to get different in tournaments, going back to Dell, Nico Collins, I think it's a way to be different where they just obviously went off last week. We've seen the ceiling of Stroud over the entire season. Like, he's phenomenal. I think Kirk's fine for cash. Tournaments, I'd probably be interested more in Ridley. It's better coverage matchup for Ridley. Zay Jones is back. Yeah, hand him the dirt. Hand him the dirt. Zay Jones is back, and it usually benefits Ridley in that scenario. Another strong piece from Jacksonville is also Evan Ingram, who is showing up in a lot of stuff.
Does that hurt the ceiling for individual pieces? Like Lawrence, like it gives them one more weapon. I don't know if we're going to call Zay Jones a weapon. I guess an upgrade, whatever else they were throwing out there, Tim Jones or something like that. But does that hurt the ceiling just like a tick for guys like Kirk or Ridley, Ingram with Xavier back, or no, whatever, you don't care. It's just one more weapon for Lawrence, and the offense gets incrementally better.
The splits it hurts Kirk and it benefits Ridley. I also think Zay's in play. Like, he's another one of these cheapies that you can throw in a Lawrence stack. Lawrence was popping significantly, like, in everything. My issue with Lawrence is he has no ceiling. But every week, like, this has happened. Like, it happened with Dak when everyone wanted to play Pollard. When I see someone everywhere, or what it happened with Burrow, I didn't want to play Burrow, and he went like, it just seemed like that guy ends up being the guy. So I'm definitely going to have some Lawrence stacks, probably prioritize Ridley in those stacks. For tournaments, that is. I think you can make a case to play Lawrence in cash. I wouldn't. I think it's Allen or Hurts for sure. Like, and I would lean Hurts. That might be the wrong take, but I think it's probably the safest take, the tush push.
Can producer Steve put in Hurts? Can Steve put in Hurts into that QB spot real quick? Just to see what we have left.
All right, we can't. Can we still not like fill out? We got to leave like 2 spots, right? Is that the old school rule? I think that's still the rule, if I'm not mistaken.
Is that still a rule? Are they?
I don't think that's a rule. But
okay,
but we'll just leave 3 spots open. What do we have left? 6K.
We can build a team. I don't think it's actually maybe we shouldn't build a team. But
I don't know the rules. I was just trying to be extra cautious, but I couldn't tell you. Maybe it's been updated. Maybe
I know we
anymore.
can leave. I know we can leave 2 spots open, but so we have 6K left. Yeah, I mean you can do a lot of things with those last 3 spots. So
the sharp move, Tim, is the leave open defense. Nobody cares about defense. That's the one you kind of leave the. We already covered defense though, so we're kind of killing a spot, right?
it's Chiefs defense. It's the wrong defense. He's playing I think it's the Chiefs. I think it's the Chiefs and cash.
Are the Chiefs cheaper?
3,100, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean you could save $100 and go Chiefs.
Bobby's like an authority on defense too. I'm not sure if you listen to the Tournament Takes podcast, but like Bob, he has an entire segment etched out for him on the podcast. So
all
stay in your lane, Tim.
Some say I'm the best defensive mind in the industry, but I don't know if that's really worth anything. It'd be worth anything if it's the NFL, but not really. Defense doesn't matter in DFS. No, I'm not. I'm totally kidding. That is not true.
The Chiefs defense is like sneaky awesome. It's really, really good. People think of their offense. Their offense is not as good as it was, but the defense is spectacular. We saw how good they were last week. But I don't think it's clear cut. And I was kind of giving Tim a hard time. I think it's kind of a coin toss and whatever. And I'm not going to argue one way or the other. Of course, if you want to pick on DeVito, by all means, pick on DeVito. I think they're both well positioned to do some things today. But Tim, you have anything else you want to add as far as this cash game, Bill? Because we still have a couple more pieces. It's weird, right? Because you can't pay up for Tyreek, right? No Tyreek this week. There's no CMC. There's no Amon-Ra. There's no Lamb. No Cowboys at all. And so like a lot of like big spends are just sort of like off the slate, right? I think CMC is one of the most comfortable big spends, probably the most comfortable big spend you can have. Eckler's not on the slate, Keenan Allen's not on the slate, so there's not a lot of like amazing like high priced players. So like maybe it is a balanced build. What are we looking at as far as the final pieces here, Tim, without giving the entire puzzle away?
I mean, Michael Pittman is really popping in projections, but I don't know if I want to play both Taylor and Pittman in my cash game team. But Pittman is an extremely, extremely strong play at only 6,800. You talked about how Tampa Bay is a pass funnel. Pittman should really excel in this matchup. He's far too cheap. I think Puka Nacua at 7,600 would be another guy. Tank Dell. But it's tough. Like if you play Hurts at quarterback, then you're not going to be able to play AJ Brown or Stephon Diggs, in my opinion, really. So you got to go a little bit lower to guys like Pittman, Nacua, Tank Dell. I love Chris Olave today. That might just be like a single entry or GPP play, but I really like Olave today. I think Drake London. What's that?
The absence of Thomas? Like, why do you love Olave today?
The absence of Thomas, and that's going to be the fastest paced game on the entire slate. So it's in a dome. I know that we hate Derek Carr. I hate Derek Carr. I get that. I completely understand that. But I think 6,600 in this matchup. I know that he's got a bad matchup on paper, but I think he's can really just break any slate. He's come really close to breaking a couple slates. So I think maybe not for cash games, but I think Olave is a really strong tournament play. I think Drake London is fine also. And then Marquise Brown is projected to play, right? That's the last I saw. Okay. Yeah. All right. So we're not going to really get any of those value Cardinal wide receivers. Not that we necessarily wanted to.
George is still in play, I think. Like he's one of those guys you can play some if you want to.
I think Demario Douglas is in the cash game conversation at 4,400.
Yeah, you didn't say it with a lot of confidence.
No, well, he's just so cheap. I think he's cheap enough. I'm just kind of looking at like what's the most expensive wide receiver that I can play in cash, and if you play Hurts, I don't think you can play Brown or Diggs. So it's probably Puka Nacua for me is the most expensive I can go. I really like Mike Evans too as a run back in a tournament, but maybe he's probably not a cash game play.
He's one of my favorite tournament plays today, Mike Evans. We'll talk about him soon enough. I think that's an awesome play. If you play Lawrence, can you get Brown in cash? Is that something you can do?
See,
Or
that
not
was
necessarily.
initially like we had $6,600 left, and I was thinking about playing Lawrence with Kirk, and then having like Tank Dell, and then you kind of have like a hybrid cash game, like kind of tournament build type team too that you can throw in like single entries. That was kind of like the 2v2 that I was kind of like looking at, is like playing Lawrence in cash games over Hurts. But I really do. I mean, Hurts is, I feel like, very, very safe. So I don't mind Bobby's call on playing Hurts in cash.
Bobby, Brian in chat saying Olave he draws AJ Terrell in that game, and that could fail. Not at that price. I believe Lattimore on the other side of that game is also out. And I was surprised. I know Tim referenced it. The blitz, shout out to Derek Carty and the blitz, the game level factors as far as expected game plays. Pretty surprisingly, I don't know. Atlanta, New Orleans expected to have 4 more plays on average as a collective than the next fastest game. So, yeah, in theory, the game that has the most plays, I want to get a part of that. But Atlanta, New Orleans.
If people don't want to deal with that matchup for Olave, then I think Rashid Shaheed is an extremely strong play at 4,300. I think he should be somebody that we try to get over the field on in GPPs.
Bobby, I think these are a couple of your guys, so it's a good question for you. Shaheed is 4.3 on DK, and then we have Pop Douglas is 4.4 on DK. You have a preference amongst those two? I think both these guys are like your guys you referenced throughout the year.
Yeah, I think I would probably go Pop Douglas just because I think A.T. Perry is going to take over the slot role for Michael Thomas. Shaheed's going to be more on the outside, like Shaheed versus zone. It's not a zone matchup. I still do like Shaheed. Don't get me wrong. I think he's fine. Dortch would be someone like I prefer Dortch to more. Like Michael Wilson's out. I'm pretty positive too with the Cardinals. So I think that opens up. I just think Dortch is just a good player. He's not going to – the issue is he's running like a 4.7, right? Like he's not the fastest guy.
He's also 5'7".
He's 5'7"?
Yeah.
Are you height shaming?
No, I'm not height shaming, but you're saying the issue. Like, ideally, if I'm going to go on Madden or whatever, I'm going to build my ideal receiver. I'm probably not going to make him 5'7". That's all.
Were you the guy? You still are the guy because I know you're a big video game guy. But when you make your NBA guys, are you making them like they're like 7 feet tall and 100 speed and jump out of the building, all 100s down the board?
No, I don't.
I was the anti that. I like to make my guys really, really small.
Yeah,
you could have like a Muggsy Bogues, So I could have like a Muggsy Bogues, like a 5'4" guy,
Yeah,
Muggsy's
incredible. We don't talk about him enough. But
he doesn't get talked about. Dean short shaming, hate to see it. Just calling it out.
It wasn't. I'm just pointing out the fact. I wasn't shaming the man. Like, if anything, I'd shout out to him for like overcoming and making an NFL career, despite the fact he's a, 5'7", and I don't even know if they're rounding up. That entire Arizona offense, though, he's like one of the taller guys, I think. But yeah, but for sure, Dortch is in play in the absence of Wilson. Other questions are popping up in chat that I do want to get to. But Bobby, what are you doing with that Atlanta game, that Atlanta New Orleans game? Because that is not the one that's popping. It's kind of in the middle, I guess. Yeah, 42.5 as far as the total there. Buffalo, Philadelphia, Jacksonville, Houston, the Rams in Arizona, at least the KC side, and Tampa, Indy, and then there's Saints and Atlanta in a dome. But we're expecting a fair bit of plays. I think Lattimore's out too. If you're going to put the old hand in the dirt, I suppose. I heard London's name thrown out there. Ritter expected to be the quarterback going forward for better or worse. I know Robinson's a guy that, like a lot of DFS, a lot of fantasy guys have been frustrated with, but he did see a bunch of usage last time out, so maybe that'll continue going forward. New Orleans not really a defense I tend to like to pick on, but yeah, that game as a whole, I think it's mostly getting ignored. You mentioned A.T. Perry, by the way, who's the guy that caught that amazing touchdown pass from Winston, where Winston threw the ball like across the field, like horizontally. It was incredible. Like from one end to the other end. You think he's going to be the one that benefits the most? Like, he feels like the safer play. Maybe I'm saying this wrong. I feel like Shaheed's got the bigger ceiling, but Perry probably is going to get like 3 for 40 or something like that. Like as far as like floor ceiling.
I feel like that's fair to say. And based on your take on Greg Dortch and his height being 5'7" and AT Perry being 6'4", you would lean the Perry side. So last night when I was up at 3 a.m. searching the DFS projection interwebs, this Atlanta team was popping for me. Like Desmond Ridder, throw up in my mouth. I do not want to play Desmond Ridder. No. I do not want to play Drake London. I don't want to play Jonnu Smith and Kyle Pitts, but I will be playing all 4 today because they were showing very well for whatever reason. I'm going to obviously want to hear your takes on it and what your thought processes are around it. I just don't know what to do with them. I'm leaving them in my player pool. I can't stand playing the idea of any of them hitting my lineups, but they're going to be in my pool. And I was getting Ridder a lot as like a pay down. If I was paying down, for sure, I would prefer Minshew. Like, I think Minshew is a phenomenal play on this slate. But Ridder was hitting my stuff, so that's interesting to note. Rashid was as well. Perry. I seen some Olave stuff like right before I went to bed. I don't know. I don't trust a car with Olave. The one play I will say is pretty interesting from this game for me on the New Orleans side. They're all interesting, but like, one that no one's really talked about is Taysom Hill because it's a positive matchup for running backs. It's a positive matchup for quarterbacks, but you don't want to play Derek Carr. The script favors the Saints, so it's not really a Kamara matchup. Do we see Hill get the goal line? He could be worked in the passing game. He is 5K. People don't want to pay 5K, but I don't know. And it's a good spot for tight end. So I like Hill a little bit. He'll be making like my large field tournament teams. He won't be in anything that's like smaller field.
The other interesting thing, not to cut you off, but the other interesting thing about Hill, like if you're going to make that case, is that who are the 2 most popular tight ends this week? Kincaid at 5'3", McBride at 4'7", who's right in the middle, Hill at 5K. And speaking of guys that have a weird floor and a pretty high ceiling, if you catch them on the right week, that is Taysom, right? He can score. He can siphon a couple touchdowns at the goal line. He can run the game out. Like he can get 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 carries. They'll line him up outside to catch some passes. I'm not in the projection team. I feel like he's like the toughest guy to project week to week. He's just hard. How do you put a projection on Taysom Hill? Because it's just all over the place. Tim, what do you got? What's your thoughts there? Because for sure, Kincaid and McBride are going to be so much more popular than Hill. And I think it's an interesting play in tournaments, large field stuff. I assume you're not getting there in your single entry, 3 entry max, but yeah, just I'm curious your thoughts as far as Taysom.
Yeah, he's definitely fine for tournaments. I have no issue with him. He's going to be about 3% owned, showing up the optimals about 4%. So that's not terrible. I prefer Evan Ingram, Kincaid, McBride, obviously. I prefer Schultz, Njoku also. So there's a lot of guys kind of in that same price range that I prefer quite a bit more. But, you know, Taysom Hill's that guy that can sneak up on everybody and score two TDs and maybe throw for 1 and break the slate at 5K. So, I mean, I certainly can't say no to people that want to play him in large field GPPs, but he's not somebody that I get into a 1 to 3 setting.
Yeah, for sure. Yep.
By the way, according to the interwebs, AT Perry 6'5". So you were short saming him by you stole an inch away from him. He's 6. You said 6'4". You're rounding down there, Bobby. I don't know. I don't know if that's short shaming or height shaming. I'm not sure what you're doing.
6'5". So all the more you'll like him today because he's 6'5". He's an inch taller, and we know you're not on the short team. You're with the tall guys.
Just throw it up and like let him get it. I did pull up his player profile because I don't know much about AT Perry. I'm not going to fake it. He was on. He played for Wake Forest apparently, a 6th round draft pick. His comp is Tyrell Williams, who played for the Lions not too long ago. When did he? I guess he was last in the Lions. No. Yeah, he was the Lions in 2021, but I guess San Diego, he was a top pick for San Diego in 2015. If you remember him, we probably played him in DFS, and it probably didn't work out many, many years ago. Okay. Hey, do you want to mention the props and pick'em package? Check out the new props and pick'em package at a limited time discount. The experts at the RG projections team, they take our premium stats, they comb through the market for any inefficiencies. And what they do with that, they help point you in the right direction as far as what's standing out as positive bets through mid-November for NBA, for NFL, for NHL. We're up 82 units for our expert picks using our model. You can easily see which lines are off and where to find them and how likely the prop will be hitting based on our tool. Check out the link in the description for more information. Yeah, it's pretty dummy proof, and it just says you can go to Underdog and Prize Picks, and it'll say, here's the line, this is the player, the over for 5.5 rebounds, and this is going to hit according to our projections at a 59% clip or whatever it is, or like a 62% clip. And there you go. It's literally like ranked from the most likely to hit to less likely to hit. So it's super, super easy to work as far as that tool. Do check that out if you're in the old prop streets. Do you guys happen to have not to put anybody in the spot, any props for betting today? Anything you got in, Tim or Bobby? You guys are both in legal. No, is Bobby Maine? Maine's legal, right? You can bet you can dabble.
Yeah,
like
a month ago we got DK and Caesars.
Okay. Anything we have today or not so much as far as props or even if you have sides or totals?
I have a lot of props. I got a lot of things going on. Saquon over 17.5 rushing attempts.
Yeah, I saw that one, and I think I saw Cardi pumping that one out as well, if I'm not mistaken. And my book, I only have one book here. It is a monopoly in Florida. Did not have that available, or I couldn't find it, but I like that bet as well. I like the Henry one over as well. I don't know if that's changed or not, if that's a stale line, but I think it was like 14.5.
What was that one?
I think it was 14.5.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
It might be stale now, but if you can find that, yeah. You got another one? You want to hit a certain threshold as far as the likes? So we got to tease the people a little bit. Maybe give you a second.
I don't care about the likes. I don't.
No foreplay for you. Just get right. Go straight to it.
No, I gotta find out my betting slip though, Dean. So you gotta give me.
I don't care about the likes. Is a great quote from Tim. Bobby, do you have anything as far as?
I'm definitely getting fired after this show. By the way, now that I said that,
we're gonna get you a RotoGrinders T-shirt with that quote on it, and there we'll finally give you an RD T-shirt.
It was nice working with both of you.
Likewise, yeah. The over hit, by the way. Week 12, we hit the over. That's all that matters. Right. Bobby, you got any props for the people? Is this something you dabble with?
For me, no. I hate sports betting outside of DFS. Like, it's just like, to me, this is probably the wrong take, but it's like a 50-50 shot. You can't get any money back if you're wrong. I've never been, this might get me fired. I'm just not, I've never liked sports betting. Like, I don't know. I like stuff where you can milk your money, like, I don't know. It's just, I don't know. I've never liked sports betting.
You never have like a hand in the dirt, like I watch the game, like this is my take. I know the projection is this. I know the line is that, and I feel like I know better.
I know all that stuff, but I don't think I can beat the casino long term, because if I do, they'll probably limit me. So what's the point? That's another take that's probably going to get me.
You got to pick your spots.
No, I agree with that, Bobby. I keep my props like super low for that reason, because I'm worried about getting limited, because that's really going to make me mad.
I try to put in a couple quote unquote donkey bets, like a couple parlay bets, a couple teaser bets, because like yesterday I saw Jimmy Butler was out with Miami. I saw the Miami news, both Bam and Butler, like once Bam was ruled out and Butler was questionable, I hit Brooklyn. I'm like, all right, let's hit Brooklyn. And they were minus 3.5, and that ended up going like to 7 or so. And you got like 30 seconds. You got to go 30 seconds, but you can't keep doing that. I feel like I can't keep getting away with it, like Aaron Paul in Breaking Bad. Yeah, I feel like I can only do that so many times, but that is the sharp, because you got great closing line value and happen to work out. But I've done that several times with players being ruled out. You get the notification. It's like, okay, now we got 25 seconds to put that bet in. And eventually, I think they're going to catch on to me, like, okay, maybe we should cut this guy off because he's clearly just betting these games when news drops. But yeah, I'm working in some nonsense too.
That's the other thing for me is like, just basically, yeah, I just got sidetracked. That's the other thing for me is like, I'm just chasing, oh, never mind. Forget it. Just keep going. I feel like I'm just chasing, like I have a kid, so I'm just chasing like, oh, am I supposed to just wait for this prop for news to come? And like, I have a million other things to do. Like, I'm not going to, and that, it's not worth my time.
Fair enough. We have, let's see, SquirrelPatrol coming in as well as Beimfohr in about 45 minutes. We can still have plenty of time. Do join the conversation and chat. Do hit that like button. Do subscribe. Do turn on those notifications, throughout some topics. Let's talk about it, Bobby. You tend to limit your quarterback pool on a given week. Is that the case once again this week? Are you down to like 4 or 5? I'm just going to kind of elevate them as far as ownership. We spreading out. How are you attacking quarterbacks? Obviously, Josh Allen looks spectacular. On the other side of that game, Hurts looks just as good, if not better. We do live in the world of a salary cap, and there are some potential cheapies out there. Potential cheapies are probably Mayfield. We talked about Mike Evans, interesting run back in that game versus Minshew. Minshew certainly interesting as well, and kind of stuck in the middle is T-Law. There are other options, but those are probably the more appealing options, I suppose. Certainly in large field, you can get goofy. You're allowed to play whoever you want. You are an adult. How are you attacking this slate from a quarterback perspective, Bobby?
Yeah, I really like Minshew. I think he's a super strong play. Someone I'm going to be targeting at 5-1. Allen and Hurts, like obviously obvious pay-ups. I think I have about 6 quarterbacks in my pool currently. Probably play Stroud along with T-Law, chase that game, Houston, Jacksonville, and throw Ritter in there, I guess, just because I'm seeing him hit stuff. I don't know how much I'm going to get. I think Kyler is very much in play. The Rams getting crushed by rushing quarterbacks. So you can play Kyler. I do like the fact that Marquise is now back in. Marquise flopped for everyone last week. So interesting to see. And I think the take around the industry is the spot's bad for Marquise, but they've been playing together since college. They have good rapport. They missed on a touchdown earlier, and I'm fine getting to Kyler and having Marquise in my pool. I think Kyler's super condensed, but right, McBride, Dortch, all those guys. So,
despite Dortch's height, I know that was kind of implied when you were saying that he's still in your pool. Tim, quarterbacks, who you honing in on?
Yeah, so I've kind of there's 3 different guys, maybe 4 different guys I'm considering for cash, which is rare for me to consider that many for cash games at this hour of the day. But Jalen Hurts would be my spend up. I'm leaning most heavily to Trevor Lawrence at 6,400 just because I really like that game. I think he's got a pretty solid floor in this matchup also. I'm considering Desmond Ritter, which I don't think I'm going to actually click that name, but I think that there is a good reason to consider him. I love that game environment, 4,800. I mean,
pairing with London?
Pay up. Yeah, probably. Yeah. Okay. And then I know Gardner Minshew is rated out really well from a points per dollar perspective, but I'm actually more interested in Baker, I think. So it's kind of one of those 4 guys. I think I am leaning Trevor Lawrence in cash right now.
What's that Baker lineup look like? Baker, Evans, and like one of Pittman or Taylor, maybe both? Maybe Downs?
Right. Yeah. Well, no, I don't think I want to play Taylor and Pittman together. I think it would just be Taylor. Like if I go Baker, I'm going to go Taylor, and then I'm going to go Evans.
By the way, let's shout out Brit in the chat. I know he's going to be on later for crunch time. He says, I know a guy, 3-0 on Moneyline NFL, 3-0 on NFL overs, and 19-10, 19-10-1 on NFL spreads. If you're worrying about getting limited on props, Brit is being very modest. The guy he knows, you know who it is? It's Brit. He knows himself. I know Brit's been doing pretty well over there at Scores and Odds, and he said his free pick today was Houston, which I was kind of surprised that Houston was a home dog to Jacksonville. A little bit disrespectful. A slight home dog, but Houston's made some big strides this year. Stroud obviously looks spectacular. I know Jacksonville's kind of like one of those teams that everybody sort of like was on the rise, and then Houston's kind of like the new team on the rise. But interesting, and also Houston walloped them earlier in the year if you care about such things. Bobby, if you're going to stack up that Tampa Bay Indianapolis game, how would you go about doing it? And just, I guess I shouldn't just focus on that game. Do you have a favorite game stack? I guess it's probably Buffalo and Philly, but salary concerns. You talked about Shakir earlier. That'll help you out a little bit. But Build a stack as far as Tampa Bay Indy if you care, or if you want to throw that game out, by all means, or just to talk about, your favorite games to stack and how would you go about doing it?
Yeah, so Josh Downs is probably my favorite play on the slate in the slot for Indy. I know projections like Pittman. I obviously like Pittman too. But like Downs a good bit at 4.8. I think a lot of people are going to play Kirk. I just prefer Downs. Good game environment. It's a very good matchup versus slot receivers, Tampa. So I like Downs a good bit. I don't think projections are picking up on it as much, but I think it's also getting steamed up. But I don't care. I just think the spot's good enough to play Downs. And I like the run back of Evans or Godwin. I think they're both in play. Baker is in play as well. I think Baker's a very sharp play. My issue with the whole Tampa Bay situation is Rachaad White. Why was he downgraded yesterday? And now he's back in. The spot's phenomenal. It's a phenomenal spot. But how do we basically bake his downgrade into our projection, right? Like, do we see his ownership? Where do you see his ownership, Dean? How do you feel like, where do we have him currently? Do you think he comes in higher or lower? Like, that's what I'm trying to figure out in terms of.
I'm cautious too. It's a good question because I was getting the running backs, and then I have a similar thought process because I love his catching ability. We currently have him at 21% owned on DK, which is the third highest, basically tied with Pacheco. Last ownership batch was like 2 hours ago. I'm sure this is going to change. And again, I think Pacheco is going to be a little bit higher than 21%. Maybe I'm wrong in that. I hope it's not because he's one of my favorites just because, big time favorite, 30-point team total. And, McKinnon's gone as well. But yeah, we have White at 21%. And I have a similar concern. Maybe Tampa just saw like, oh, wait, we have Sean Tucker and Chase Edmonds. We just got to find a way to make White go. Our backups are so terrible. We just got to figure it out and then get that Twitter all going. I don't know, but I'm a little bit hesitant on it. And it's funny you said because the same game, and maybe I'm being overly cautious, and you probably shouldn't be when you're making your lineups, is the Josh Downs thing because we haven't seen a good Josh Downs game in a while, and he was dealing with that knee. There was that one game where he tried to give it a go and he just couldn't do it. He had to tap out, and I guess he's fine, but I feel a little bit concerned that maybe there's something still lingering there as far as his injury. Again, he's going to play. Not trying to make anybody freak out, but the dollar for dollar, I think, is a better play than Pittman if he is healthy. I like them both, but salary cap concerns, I like Downs more. But it seems like the field is not concerned, to answer your question, Bobby. And I guess I should ask Tim because I think White is, we talked cash game builds earlier. He's a fine running back for cash if you land on it, not forcing it, but if he's the guy that makes everything else work as your third running back, if that's how you're going to build, I'm okay with it. Tim, what do you have as far as White? And should I be concerned about Downs, or we're assuming he's just fine and then that's it? Don't be paranoid.
I'm assuming that Downs and White are fine in these spots. I'm not bumping them down due to these injuries. I think Rachaad White and Downs are perfectly fine in all formats. This game is fantastic, right? Super, super high-paced game. In Indy, which only makes it better. So doing the Minshew, Pittman, White, Downs stack, I think is completely viable. I really like it. The only problem is it's going to be owned. That's going to be ownership, but that type of stack is going to be fairly chalky. So it kind of depends on ownership and ceiling, right? And so that's going to be a pretty high owned way to go about this slate.
Hitting up some questions here in chat. It's me, Breezy. What number do we get Barkley at? We currently have Barkley on DK at 12% ownership. Let's see. Question: Warren versus Derrick Henry is an interesting question. We saw Warren kind of break out last week, had that big run. Canada got the boot there, the OC for Pittsburgh. Did you guys see the kicker trash talking Canada?
I did.
That was an amazing clip. Canada was celebrating a victory, and the kicker, when the kicker's trash talking you, your days are numbered. You're gonna get that red tag in the locker any day now. And he was celebrating a victory, and the kicker's yeah, no thanks to you, I can assure you that. The kicker said that. The kicker's talking smack, which I love so much. Bobby, I'll ask you this one, right? Warren versus Henry, D-Hember, yada yada. If ever there was a spot for Derrick Henry to summon up the old Derrick Henry, This feels like a really, really good spot here versus Carolina, home favorite as well. Not a big team total, but they're favored by over 3. I don't know if there's anybody in football that's more game script dependent than Derrick Henry. If they're behind, all of a sudden, Spears is gonna get more run. Warren versus Henry, Bobby. What are you doing with these two? I'll pull up the ownership right now. I think Henry's going to be more popular by a good margin. Yeah, we have Henry currently at 16%, so it's not like sneaking up on anybody, despite the fact, I don't know if you guys, I've not played him all season, I don't think. Pretty sure I've not played Henry once, outside of maybe like a sprinkle here and there. Warren, we're getting 11% versus Cincinnati, a Cincinnati offense that might give positive field position to Pittsburgh because they're without Burrow. Browning, I believe, is the name of their quarterback today. Yeah, Bobby, Warren versus Henry, any big takes here, any big stands? Or are you kind of with the field or what?
I like both. I think they're both very good plays. Canada's out of there. I think the prevailing narrative is that's going to be something that's going to affect this running back situation. But the likelihood is, I don't know, I would lean to that. It might, because it seems like they're trying to basically change stuff around in Pittsburgh. So you could probably go to a guy like Warren. It still could be Harris though, too. I just would prefer Warren because I think he's the much better running back. In terms of Henry, it's a really good spot. What'd you say? What was what did you just say that term?
We have Henry at like 16% and Warren at like 11% currently.
Yeah, no, I thought you said like December. I didn't understand what you said.
The December thing. You never heard December? Like that's when, I know it's not officially December, but you've heard that term before, right? Where Derrick Henry takes over at the end of the season. He's getting stronger while all linebackers, are weakening and they want to less and get in front of him because he's like a big dude. They don't want to tackle him.
I know that it's good to play him later in the season. I hadn't. Maybe that's, I don't know. I'm just oblivious sometimes. But yeah. So yeah, for me, like Henry's a good play for that. It's getting later in the season. It's colder out. The game is in Carolina. Like, how cold is it in Carolina? Where is it in Tennessee? Like, it's freezing outside in Boston today. I don't know. For me, like, what are you guys talking about in terms of cold? Like, I guess it's late in the year, so guys are banged up, but I don't think it's going to be like, I don't know. It's
so Roth wrote it up as green, a brief bout of showers, possible rainfall totals here for the entire day for roughly 0.01 or 0.02 inches of rain. So rain, not really a concern. For what it's worth, it is orange currently in Cincinnati. The bulk of the rain today is lining up for to fall during the game. I expect a steady, moderate rainfall for most of the game. Temperatures in the 40s, which adds to the overall nasty factor of the game, but shouldn't have much of an impact on scoring. Winds remain around 10 miles per hour. Yellow in Philly. I'll go ahead and drop this in chat, and I presume Rolf will update this before kickoff. I pulled this before the show. But Tennessee is currently green. I can't tell you the temperature. Maybe producer Steve can tell us. He's in Tennessee. He can look out his window possibly and see the stadium. They're currently building the new one. At least I don't think broke ground on it. The new one looks like it's going to be spectacular according to the models there in Nashville. Go ahead, Bobby.
So I just want to say, like, Rachaad White, Rachaad White and basically who's the Colts running back there, Taylor. Like, what if the move? Like, I think this is pretty much going back to what the previous conversation, getting a little off topic. I like Jaylen Warren and Henry as pivots off of those two very chalky running backs. I like them a lot. What I will say is, can't you just see like the Jesse tweet? Like, we played Rachaad White. Why did we play Rachaad White? He got the downgrade, and like, just that just stuck in my head for whatever reason. I just can see Rachaad White busting for whatever reason. And Henry at 6'4", right there. I like it. I get Rachaad White's floor is astronomical because of what he sees in the passing game and everything. So I get it for cash. But he's the one in tournaments. Like, I would try to come up. The downgrade just makes it like it's like an NBA. Maybe I'm in the NBA weeds right now, Dean, where like a midday downgrade isn't good. I'm getting that like itch, like my spidey senses are tingling a little bit. So like
maybe they're being overly cautious. You never really know. It's and each organization does things differently, right? And the NFL also has cracked down on they were pissed off when players that they don't get noted. Like remember the Burrow situation. Burrow got hurt that night. He was holding his wrist. There was no mark as far as being on the injury report. So maybe teams are being overly cautious. I don't know how they're personally handling it. It's hard to sort of read, but maybe it's just nothing. Like as far as White, like it just popped up on the blip just for whatever reason, and that's that. And pretend like we never saw it. You got to take on this, Tim, as far as Warren versus Henry. Are you as into Pacheco as I am? Am I overselling Pacheco? And how you're handling running backs in general? Maybe we're missing somebody. Feel free to bring somebody else to the conversation when it comes to RBs and GPPs.
Yeah, so I think Pacheco's fine. His price on FanDuel is fantastic. The only concern that I have is they do whatever they can to not let him score a touchdown. So like when they get inside the 5, they just like do weird plays to anyone other than him. So
tight end reverse.
Yeah, so I don't know. Like I'm a little bit worried about his TD upside, but he's only 6,200. So I mean, he should get plenty of opportunities if he can just break one play. Like he's there. So I have no issue with him really. The conversation about Warren versus Henry. Well, I mean, there's $1,000 price difference, so it really depends on what you can get with that $1,000, right? That's the answer to that question. They're both fine plays, but they're different price points. So if you can pay up at a better wide receiver or something like that, depends on your team as a whole for that question. Two guys that I wanted to talk about. Well, there's a couple guys that I wanted to talk about at running back. One is Kyren Williams. He's only showing up at 7% ownership. I think he's a very, very strong play. So, and then I don't know, did you guys touch on Ramondre Stevenson?
I don't want to talk about him. I want to leave that for Bobby because he's the Patriot homer. But I saw him hitting some stuff earlier this week, and I don't think he still is. But theoretically, it's a good matchup there versus the Giants. What do you think of Kyren as far as coming back from the IR? It feels like he's healthy and good to go, and maybe like they're overly cautious and like he's been healthy for a week or so, right? But do you think they just throw him right back in? That's traditionally what they do. The head coach there typically has like, this is my lead dog as far as running back, and that's that. There's not a lot behind him as far as Royce Freeman and Evans. Good matchup there versus Arizona. If we're getting the same usage we got earlier in the year, Kyren looks awesome. Do they kind of ease him in? What do you think that they're going to do with Kyren? Because if he is getting 75, 80, 85% of the whatever it is, he looks like a gret play. And what's your read on that, Tim?
I mean, we have projected for 15 rush attempts, I think that's fair. 2.5 receptions, 22 receiving yards, 74 rushing yards. Like, I think that's. I would consider that maybe on the lower end. Like, maybe give him like 16 or 17 rush attempts. I just really like the ownership. Like, he's not going to be that highly owned, so I think he makes for a really strong pivot, and he's showing up in optimals not 9% of the time, which is comparable to guys like Pacheco, who's going to be 3 times as owned. So in large field GPPs, I really like Kyren. He's not going to get as much of the work as he did earlier in the season, but I still think he's going to get quite a bit.
Somebody in chat, John, said, read the Schefter tweet on White. I just pulled it up. This is from yesterday, but maybe it's still relevant. White was added to the injury report Saturday as questionable for Sunday's game, only as a matter of precaution, per source. There's nothing structurally wrong with his knee. It briefly locked up on Friday, and just to be careful, the Bucs added him to the injury report. But he is playing Sunday, and in the words of the source, he is fine, which is an air quote. So, okay, if he's fine, then no worries. There you go. Good to hear that. If you have any thoughts there on that, Bobby, by all means, as far as Williams. And on the other side of that game, Connor's pretty cheap, and he's the lead guy there, and there's not much behind him as well, and it's a good matchup also, and he's in a dome. Or anybody else as far as running backs that you think we should focus on that we've kind of neglected. I'm trying to see. I saw some names thrown out in chat.
I see too that I can get on Kyren. Like I'm with Tim. Like I think Kyren just steps right into a workhorse role. I'm going to be over on Kyren. But this is why, like, I'm trying to poke holes in these running backs, because the running back position, the opportunity cost is so strong. Like, we haven't talked about DeAndre Swift, who I think is a phenomenal play. Bill's giving up a ton of passes, receptions to running backs. He hasn't gone over like 3 receptions in terms of like a game, but it could be one of those games where that becomes a thing. Larger field stuff, I throw Gainwell in there for if you want to throw him into your pool. Jerome Ford is in a smash spot, but you just have to get the snaps right. Hunt's snaps are coming up. I think he was up to 44%, but Ford got all the high value touches. We know Ford can break off a long run. I like Ford a good bit. You can make a case for Kamara, but the projections to me are indicating that the Saints are going to be leading. And if they're in front, like it's not like it's more Kamara's like wants a trailing game script. So he's not someone I'm too interested in, but I think he's fine. This could be the Bijan week that everyone's trying to make be a Bijan. Like Bijan really came on last week. Maybe Bijan's just going to make my pool, but he's probably like the last running back in for me. But I like Swift. I like Ford a ton. I like Kieran Williams. I have a bunch of. You hit on Henry. I have a lot of him. And it makes me not want to play Taylor or get away from Rachaad White or one of these running backs. But Taylor's hitting everything. It looks like Taylor's the right play. And that's why I keep going back to, well, we have this little blip of an injury on White. Like, is there something I should be skeptical on? The issue is I'm playing a lot of Minshew, so I probably want some Rachaad White, but I also like Evans a good bit. Like Evans is probably my favorite Tampa Bay piece, just because he's leverage off White. If Evans catches a bomb, it takes away from White, but you could say that White isn't as rushing dependent as he is pass catching, so it's really not that big of a hit actually. I don't know. For me, like I really like Jerome Ford at 5.6. If you get that right in tournaments, Swift is another one. Like he's the piece that I think gets lost in translation on the Philly side. People are going to try to jam in Devontae Smith, who I think is the better of the two to play between him and AJ Brown. But I really like Swift too.
Expand on Ford, because like that offense is probably going to be somewhat, I don't want to say inept, but like it might struggle with DTR. Tough place to play there in Denver. Pretty solid defense. They're dogs. They tend to bring in strong sometimes, so it's kind of 3 guys, right?
Very rarely strong though, right? Like we're not
sprinkle in. Yeah, he'll sprinkle in, but it's just enough to be annoying. But yeah, and like the split between Ford versus Hunt is tricky. He's only going to be 2% owned, so like if you're going to have like 6%, like what number are you looking at right now? I mean, not to lock you in, but I'm curious. You're talking for like maybe 10%. How much are you going to get of it?
I have 15% currently.
Okay. Yeah.
And I think you correlate it with the Eagles D. Maybe I should come down a little bit. For me, it's just
you have 15% Swift, you said?
No, Ford.
Oh, Ford. Okay.
Yeah, he got all the high value. I think just it's more a Millie play. I'm not playing it in smaller field stuff.
Yeah.
But I do think it's an interesting play just because he can break off a long run. He got all the goal line, all like 5 touches inside the 20. I know Hunt's snaps are ticking up, but if the game goes Ford's way and Denver isn't great, they're not the greatest rushing defense, like they can be had. So I don't, like we've seen all year, we've been attacking running backs versus Denver. So I don't mind Ford for large field GPPs. Yeah, the opportunity cost at running back, it's significant. So you got to get these guys right. I think the most important decision point on the slate is what you could do with Taylor and White, because I don't think they're as bulletproof as everyone's making them out to be.
Yeah, you're going to be under on both, it sounds like.
I currently am, but I want to. So with the fact that I have Minshew, I want to up my Taylor, but I also probably want to up Rachaad White in that case. But one of them I want to get away from, and I just can't really figure which one it is. I think I'm leaning White, I guess. I'm leaning being under on White and upping my Taylor, but I'm not sure.
But you're fine both. It sounds like you're fine playing Mayfield with White, and you're fine playing Minshew with Taylor.
Yeah, for sure. You could. Yeah. I want teams that have those guys. I just don't think. I don't know where the field is currently on these guys. Like, I understand there's just so much opportunity. Someone's going to get steamed up. Like Pacheco, and to me, is definitely getting steamed up.
That's who I think it's going to be. Yeah.
Pacheco's going to be like, I could see Pacheco being the highest owned right when everything locks. Pacheco's the highest owned running back on the slate. Like, it wouldn't surprise me one bit. So maybe I should just be playing Taylor. And I will say this, like, to poke holes in Pacheco, like Max Crosby might play. He's trying to play. He's doubtful, but he's trying to be the first person all year. I seen a tweet or something that he's trying to play. But it was Kelsey that was really hitting everything. And Tim made a really good point early on in the show that around the goal line, they're just giving it to Kelsey. They're not giving it to Pacheco. Like, it's going to Kelsey. Mahomes is throwing it to 15 different guys. It's more condensed this week too. So you can make the case, like, you just play Mahomes and fade Pacheco, get ahead of what you're seeing with this Pacheco news. I just think Pacheco is probably a good play. But I think when it's all said and done, Pacheco might be the highest on running back because everyone has the same sentiment on Taylor that we have. Everyone has the same sentiment. Well, I don't know if everyone has the same sentiment as me on Rachaad White, but it's definitely a little scary, the fact that he got dinged. I know we're supposed to trust Schefter and everything, but I just want to – I don't know. I'm just trying to think.
I want to talk receivers. I want to cut you off. We got to talk some receivers. We got 15 minutes until we get we get Ebeimfohr and SquirrelPatrol. I want to answer some questions if they come up in chat. They're organically due throughout some questions, throughout some topics. What have we missed? What do you want us to focus on? We're happy to do so. Also, hit that like button, subscribe. Turn on those notifications, hit all the things. Stevenson, we kind of mentioned him in passing, Bobby. 14% ownership for Ramondre. I think that might be a tick high just because I think most people just think that's gross. But, if you're just running sims or you're just running lineups, if you're, running optimals, then you don't necessarily have people are less likely, I think, to just say, I don't want that, just whatever it gives me. Right now, Bobby, we did get a refresh as far as ownership as of 10:36. It's still Taylor in the lead, 36%, and Pacheco at 21%. So, we'll see how that ends up. But Stevenson at 14% on your Patriots, Bobby. And we just a shout out to, we didn't mention Travis Etienne the entire show, and he's getting 11% ownership, and he obviously is a guy that can break a slate too. Just sort of worth acknowledging his existence. Just because we didn't talk about him doesn't mean you can't play him. Final word there, Bobby, and give me a thought as far as Stevenson when it comes to running backs.
Yeah, I like Stevenson. I think he correlates well with the Patriots D. Everyone has the same sentiment that you have. They don't want to play Stevenson. I'm going to play Stevenson today. So many running backs today that are in good spots.
Tim, you got anything else as far as running backs? You want to talk about receivers? A lot of receivers, like the cheap guy. We've mentioned Justin Watson, Demario Douglas, Josh Downs. We mentioned Dortch as like a cheap dart. Shaheed is another cheap guy to kind of make stuff work. If you just play Tank Dell every single week, that's kind of worked out. Pittman, if you have the money for Indianapolis, of course, A.J. Brown and Steph Diggs. That game certainly looks like the most likely to shoot out, except, they cost a lot. And Devontae Smith is kind of sort of somewhat interesting as well as a wide receiver too there. He was the guy that shined last week. Doesn't necessarily mean it's not going to be Brown. Brown had that run of 5 or 6 games in a row where he absolutely crushed the slate, crushed the world. Anything else, Tim, as far as running back you want to talk about receivers? I just threw a bunch at you. What do you want to focus on?
Yeah, I think we should move on to wide receiver. I am glad that you did mention Travis Etienne. I was going to mention him. I love that game. I love that play. But yeah, so moving on to wide receiver. I was thinking, maybe this is finally a week that Tank Dell won't be projected that well now that he's actually priced up. And I was incorrect. He is still popping in projections. That's how good he is with CJ Stroud. So, yeah, definitely Tank Dell at 6,900 is a fantastic play. Where I'm getting kind of hung up on is I really like Puka Nacua today at 8% owned. I also think you could make an argument for like Cooper Kupp, assuming that ankle is okay. They should really be able to shred this Arizona secondary, I think, pretty easily. So I really like that they're not like super high owned guys. And like Nacua is only 7,600. So it's pretty easy to get to him over guys like Dell or Pittman or Mike Evans. Like, he's just a little bit more expensive. So I really like Nacua for tournaments. I'd love to be able to get the AJ Brown. I think the way that I'm constructing my team, he might just be too expensive, and I'm just going to have to hope that he doesn't break the slate. I've already mentioned Chris Olave. I still really like him. Rashid Shaheed, I think, is another guy in that Atlanta Saints game that I really like. I really like Drake London today at only 5,000. And then it's like, these cheap guys it's such a funny selection of these cheap wide receivers. I stand by Justin Watson. He's still going to get quite a few targets at min price. Like I said, though, before, probably not going to win you a milli, right? But I think if you're playing, smaller field, single entry type stuff, and he gets you 10 to 12 points, I think that's fine. So it's kind of with him, it kind of comes down to contest selection. Cash games, I think you probably should be playing Watson in cash. But like I said, he's probably not going to win you the $20 millionaire maker. He probably doesn't have the ceiling. I think Greg Dortch is a fantastic pivot away from Watson. Yeah. So, I mean, there are quite a few. I mean, this slate, there are so many different ways that you can make your builds. It's very tricky because I think we do have some good value at the low end, and we've got guys in the mid range that are absolutely fantastic.
It's also a good slate to swap players, right? Depending on how your 1 o'clock guys do. 10-game slate. Good, NFL hooked us up 6-4. And some of the better games are at 4 o'clock. Rams, Arizona, 4 o'clock. Cleveland, Denver. But Buffalo, Philadelphia, and then Kansas City and the Raiders. So, based upon how your 1 o'clock guys are doing, if they're doing spectacular, maybe if you have something super ambitious in one particular lineup, maybe get a little bit more chalky and say, come catch me. You mentioned Nacua, and I want to get Bobby's take on this. Nacua is interesting, but I make the same argument for Kupp. Kupp's only 8K. And he really wanted to play last week. If you watched him, if you were watching that game, like I was, and hoping he would come back in, and he was on the sidelines and jogging, and he had his helmet on, and he's like, get me in this game. And they would not put him in, despite the fact, when you have your helmet in your hand or helmet in your head, that means you're good to go, essentially. They'll take your helmet away if they don't want you going in there. And I don't know, man. If he's healthy, and word is he's going to play, I guess he's fine. AK Cooper Kupp versus Arizona, he could shred this team. But, he was also on my best lineup last week, and he just it completely flopped because, he got injured right away. He also dropped a 40-yard touchdown. I don't know what happened there. Let's move on from that. But, yeah, Bobby, receivers, and I want Kupp more than I want Nacua. Nacua's fine, but I just give me Kupp. I think he's got a bigger ceiling. And just receiving in general, I know we mentioned a bunch of names, Bobby. And what's your Cooper Kupp take? Are you going to go right back to him? I assume you played some last week. I don't know.
Why do you assume? Because you suggested that I play him, and you just think I'm listening to everything you say. I know you're sweating that 40-yard pass where he did the twirl around. And
the worst.
I did heed your advice. I played some Kupp. Yeah, maybe we can get some flop lag with Kupp. No, it's pretty interesting. We haven't mentioned Stafford, and you have Nacua showing very well, Kupp showing very well, Kieran. So that stack can kind of come together in itself. I would prefer the Kyler side, but in terms of Kupp, I think he's a fantastic play. He's one of the guys. Is he going to be low owned? Because I want to be over on Cooper Kupp when he absolutely destroys the Cardinals this week. He's cheaper than AJ Brown.
10% right now on DK.
Yeah, 10%. I can play 20% Cooper Kupp versus Arizona. Yeah. Let's go. Cooper Kupp, and they get beat on the outside. They get beat. He's all over the formation, so it doesn't matter. I like Cooper Kupp. I like Nacua. I think they're both good plays. I would prefer Kupp if I had to choose. Do you want me to get into other wide receivers?
Yeah, go for it. Give me your list, man. Whatever you got. Give the people, hook them up with some receivers that you're maybe on the field, or maybe ones you're going the other way and saying this is just Nico Collins, 11% ownership. I'm just not going to get any Nico Collins, whatever reason. I don't know. Not really sure where you're at as far as your takes. We're seeing Deontay Johnson getting 16%. Feels a little. I mean, that guy, what is his ceiling? He never gets touchdowns. He had the one touchdown, I believe, and good for him. But it's cheap, right? But he feels like a quote unquote safe play, I guess. Is he somebody that's going to win it for you? Probably not. But yeah, whatever you have, give me all you got as far as receivers.
Yeah, so on the low, I'll just start on the lower end. It's Downs and Shakir, which I pretty much gave all show. I'm gonna have a ton of them. The two of them I think are fantastic. Evans, Pittman. Getting into this Atlanta Philly game, like I think we've seen this last year when Goddard was out. They were going to a lot of short screens to Devontae Smith. So I prefer Smith to AJ Brown. He's going to be the one that I try to get to a little bit more this week. It's a better coverage situation for Smith too. Hand in the dirt take.
There it is.
Yeah, so I like Smith a good bit. I love Kupp. Like you said, I think Kupp's a fantastic play. Kupp and Smith are currently in my main team with those other two guys, Downs and Shakir. But yeah, that's pretty much, those are receivers that I have interest in. Nico Collins, I think, is a very good play in Houston stacks. I prefer Ridley to Kirk. I prefer Pickens to Deontay. I don't really want to play too many of those guys. Rashid Shaheed, like we talked about, I think is a good play. Pop Douglas is another good play. Tank Dell is a very, very good play. Make sure you play Tank Dell like every week with Stroud, like Stroud, Tank Dell. Make sure you get those guys together. It's pretty obvious now that they have a little bromance going, and that he's looking for him a ton. So yeah, I don't mind Tank Dell. Who else can we talk about, Dean? What other receivers do you like?
Who's your favorite receiver under 4K? Is it Shakir?
Yeah, by far, Shakir. By far.
Yeah.
Shakir's getting steamed up too, but I'm just playing.
You moved the needle. People heard Bobby's on Shakir, and all of a sudden he jumped up to like 9%.
Did you say under 4K, Dean?
Yeah.
Okay, so Shakir is his favorite.
Yeah. Who's yours?
Yeah. I'm not sure. I was hoping that it wasn't under 4K. I really like Shaheed today, but he's 43. So,
okay.
Yeah.
I like Shaheed too. I don't have any.
You like Downs more than Shaheed? I like Downs more than Shaheed, I think. Obviously,
I like Downs more than Shaheed, a lot more than Shaheed. I like Downs as the best receiver in the 4K range by far. It's Downs. Like, who's there? Kirk's in the same window
Pop
for
Douglas.
cash game guys. Pop Douglas. Like, yeah, just give me Downs every time.
What about your best big spend, Bobby, as far as like Diggs versus Brown? I mean, nobody, like absolutely nobody is playing any Cincinnati receivers today. Just sort of throwing it out there. Nobody's playing Jamar Chase. I don't think I am, but you can, I guess. But he's got to beat Brown. He's got to beat Diggs. He's got to beat those guys. He's got to beat Kupp. Your favorite big spend receiver, Bobby, is who?
Yeah, it's interesting. The 700 discount on Chase. My favorite big spend would probably be. This is weird because I think I think Kupp's my favorite, to be honest. Like, do we see like? I think Kupp is probably my favorite. Like, if I was playing cash games, I don't know if I'd be getting to Diggs or Brown, even though obviously you want that. That's why cash is so tough this week, because I think the majority are going to go to Diggs or Brown. I would just play Kupp. I think Kupp's going to absolutely smash.
But you'd play him in cash Kupp? I feel like Kupp is a little bit of fragility just because
it's too thin. Yeah.
No, I mean, if he was perfectly healthy, 100%, yeah, that price in that matchup, yeah. But like, you don't really. There's a little bit of concern.
I prefer Diggs to Brown. Then I prefer Diggs to Brown.
Tim, you got anything else then as far as receivers? I do want to touch on tight ends. Obviously, Squirrel and Erik are going to talk about all this as well, and it's a good game theory conversation because the tight end position, 3 players are going to have well more than 50% of the field. Actually, just 2, according to our ownership stuff. Now, obviously, you can throw a tight end in the flex as well if you want to. Are going to have McBride at 33%, 33% for McBride. But, he's justified it every step of the way as far as the asking price. They keep bumping it up, but not enough. And Dalton Kincaid, he's 5'3", McBride's 4'7". Collectively, that we're projecting them for 55% ownership. Tight end, you're just kind of shooting for a touchdown. But like Kincaid doesn't really play like a tight end. McBride doesn't really play like a tight end. There's Ingram, who's the next guy at 16%, which that's probably something I'm not getting. He just doesn't get in the end zone. I guess eventually he has to spell it at some point, but they don't. Once he hits the 15-yard line, like they can't pass the ball to him for some reason. It's very strange. And then there's Kelce. If you happen to find some salary, he's getting 11%. And Njoku got a ton of work last week from the new quarterback, little screen stuff. But we'll take the point, every step of the way. But there's not a lot of depth at tight end. And Tim, are you embracing McBride and Kincaid? If not, how are you being different as far as tight end? Because it's really, I can't remember the last time we saw it this condensed. And it's not even like just like a 3K guy. We remember McBride was 3K or 2.8 or 3.3. Now he's 4.7, but still it pops because he's great. And
because he plays 100% of the snaps and gets 25% of the targets. So 4,700 I think is still too cheap. I completely understand if you want to fade him in tournaments. He's a must play in cash games though. Definitely, like that he should, no question about it. Dalton Kincaid is a great tournament pivot, but he's still coming in with 23% ownership. So he wouldn't necessarily be my pivot. I think my pivot, if I was going kind of like in that price range, would be Dalton Schultz at 5,400. Like we've seen CJ Stroud just have these humongous ceiling games. So I think Schultz and like guys like Taysom Hill would be my pivots. So if you don't want to play McBride, because Kincaid is not going to be low owned. He's just going to be lower owned than McBride. I think Cade Otton is super interesting if we want to punt the position, 3,200 for tournaments. I can't see a world where I can get to Kelce today in cash or GPP. I don't think that's a very good game script for him either. So this should be a game that KC handles pretty easily, I would imagine. So I don't know. Like obviously you can always play Kelce, but I'm not going to get there. Tight end is, I think, one of the easier positions to kind of decipher because it's obviously McBride for cash. And then there are these other pivots that are completely playable also.
We got Squirrel and Beimfohr coming in shortly, but give me Bobby, what do you got as far as tight end? It's super condensed, and typically when it is this condensed, I like to get away from it. But as we've kind of talked about, McBride and Kincaid both look really good.
I can already tell you who Beimfohr is going to talk about. He's going to talk about Jonnu Smith and Kyle Pitts, and Ritter, and Drake London.
Otton's the best punt, right? Because he's on the field and he plays. He's there every snap base. Well, who's better at 3-2? We're just saying 3-2. Give me somebody less than 3-2.
I like the Atlanta guys. I'd be with Beimfohr on this. I like the Atlanta guys for tournaments. I guess if you're playing cash or smaller field stuff, you can go to Otton.
Jonnu's 3-4. Pitts is 4K. So okay. We're gonna spend a little more.
Those guys for tournaments, but they're like large field tournament plays. Travis Kelce's like so much leverage to Kelce when Pacheco becomes the chalk running back because they're just gonna. That's what I was thinking about in terms of small field. Like Pacheco's gonna be the highest owned. You play Kelce. Kelce gets the 2 touchdowns. Pacheco will probably play fine, but you got 15 other running backs that can beat Pacheco.
What about if you play Kelce, would you not play Watson? Like if you're double stacking, you don't have to stack.
Kelce's leverage off of both of them. That's why I think
that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, play on the slate, like by far. I think Kelce's a super strong play. You hit on Kincaid. I love Kincaid. I think Kincaid's a very good play. I have a lot of Shakir Kincaid stuff. I guess Broccoli Boy was saying that's hitting the Sims a good bit for Sim Lab, so that's always good to hear. Trey McBride's the cash game guy, I would imagine, and Tim hit on Schultz and Evan Ingram. I think those two guys are the other two that make up my player pool, and that's pretty much it from the tight end. Schultz isn't going to be owned, right? Like everyone's going to play.
No, he's cheaper than both the other two tight ends that are going to go getting all the ownership. McBride's 4.7 and Kincaid's 5.3, and Schultz is 5.4, so he's going to get like 5% ownership, if that. He's only going to be there in Stroud stacks, basically.
Yeah, I forgot to mention Taysom Hill too. Like 5K, every single position that Taysom plays is positive leverage. To like it's just a positive matchup for Taysom today. Running back, wide receiver, tight end. And he's priced between the two chalkiest tight ends. So, like, don't overlook Taysom.
Well, you mentioned Broccoli Boy. I know it's Tim's boy in chat. About an hour ago in chat, he said, good show. I'm off to make pasta, which, like, he's making pasta at, like, 10 o'clock in the morning. Like, okay.
In his tidy whities.
Well, I don't know if he specified that or not, but I don't know what he's wearing, but he said he's going to make pasta at 10 in the morning. I'm not here to pasta shame, but I just thought that was an interesting take. Hey, we do have Squirrel and Ebeimfohr coming in a second momentarily, but we should fire off some of our favorite takes. And Tim, anything you've got to come up with on the fly through this conversation, anything you've held on through the entire show, give me your boldest take. It could be pasta related or NFL related, whatever you got for the people. Something we can use in the DFS streets.
Someone mentioned Njoku. He's a very good play at tight end as well. I think he's seen a significant amount of targets with we skipped over him, so I just wanted to make sure we added someone in chat caught us. So that's good. Carolina guy caught us. You got our back. It's good to know.
Yeah, DTR, he was targeted 15 times last week. Njoku. I think a lot of them was like little screen stuff, right? Because DTR, I don't know how much they trust him, right, to just fully unleash the playbook there. But
Eric's asking about Tommy DeVito. Are you?
I was going to say Eric wants to know about Tommy DeVito.
That's the cue, I think, for our show to end. I think. I don't know. You guys tell. Hey, shout out to DeVito. He's got a great celebration when things go well for him. So good for him for that. And he actually put up a legit score last week. So he peaked. And in like 20 years in a bar, he's going to be telling people, like, I swear I was the quarterback for the Giants for like a whole month. This really happened.
What do you think he'll be doing at the bar? Will he be the bookie? Or will he what's his role going to be at the bar? He's bartending?
Dude hanging out at the bar. I don't know. He's pulling like a Sam Malone, like he's back in my day. But I don't, I'm
Uncle Rico in the bar.
Hey, you know what? He's living his best life right now, and good for him. We got Ebeimfohr, and we have Squirrel as well. But that is our cue, right? We're done when DeVito comes up, unless I know Squirrel. I think Squirrel kind of touched on him last week. It's possibly an option.
I did. I thought you were saying it's your cue because it's like my turn to talk about DeVito.
Yeah. Is that momentum going to go forward today? Is
I thought Squirrel was completely shipping King of the Beach when I seen DeVito throw to Slate.
Same.
And I was like, they really let this guy in my head. I was like, they really let this guy be the last one in. Like they really let him just sneak in there, and he's gonna win with Tommy DeVito and Darius Slate. And like that was my thought process in my head. And I was like,
It's too bad it wasn't my thought process. It was in there. It was percolating around. Just couldn't go there. It ended up with Sam Howell. Did not see the Commanders like losing that game. I thought DeVito would keep it close. I thought Saquon Barkley could get a long touchdown. I just couldn't get there with DeVito. And probably not going to get there this week. But don't let me talk you off of him. If
Tim's playing him. He's been touting him all show. DeVito.
Tim, you a big fan of DeVito, Tim?
Definitely not.
You've been holding back on the people, or you're going to unleash DeVito and out of nowhere? And you didn't mention him one time throughout the show.
I am not unleashing DeVito.
I love how you're going to preface that for people that didn't watch, Dean. No one's playing DeVito and didn't pick up on the sarcasm. Yeah.
Well, you never know. People might they said DeVito's the guy. You got to have all the qualifiers.
Eric just said DeVito in cash games. So we got to get out of here.
Tommy DeVito comes up and they want to know if it's cash or tournaments. So I think you guys are infringing on our ridiculous quarterback takes. I think I got.
Who are you on today, Ebeimfohr? The Atlanta guys?
You know it. Yeah. We're back to the Falcons.
It's funny that comment there from Rock'em Sock'em Sports there, Rock'em Sock'em Stocks. A comment earlier that he made, I wanted to point out, I wouldn't be surprised if Spears goes for 150 and 3 touchdowns. Maybe Henry rolls his ankle or gets concussed. Like maybe anything. Like you can tell yourself any story. Maybe anybody rolls their ankle. Maybe anybody gets concussed. It is football. It's a pretty violent game. Hey, Tim, give the people a hot take before you step aside and get out of here. Bobby, have one ready and one up. Tim, go for it, Tim.
Rashid Shaheed scores 2 receiving TDs.
Bobby, see it and raise it.
Josh Downs scores 2 receiving TDs.
All right. Do appreciate y'all watching the first portion here. We're going to go ahead and yield to Eric and Squirrel, and then crunch time comes afterwards. No need to go anywhere. We take you all the way up to lock. 2 more hours still of NFL DFS conversation. Good luck in week 12. Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Bobby. Thanks to everybody in chat. Do hit that like button. And here goes Erik Beimfohr. Talk about DeVito for the next hour. Go for it.
DeVito, Desmond Ridder. We're going to get to all the bad plays here over the course of the next hour. But of course, bye, Squirrel. Thank you for joining us. I'm sure you guys enjoyed the show. As always, those 3 guys, just phenomenal. but we are here. I am your host, Erik Beimfohr, joined by, as always, almost always, except when he's at live finals, trying to ship with fun tournament takes. We are the GPP Final Takes show. Erik and John, aka SquirrelPatrol, aka one of the best DFS players on the planet. And John, we're gonna get right down to it because I find this slate in particular. I'm not playing Tommy DeVito. Let's get that out of the way first. But I think the fact that like some kind of more chaotic plays, in my opinion, are like very much in play. I love these kind of slates. You know, I say that I'll say this a couple times a year, and then we get to 3:00, and I'm like, God, I hated this slate. Why did I play the Falcons or whatever? But we have a small slate, right? So we had the Thanksgiving games, we had a Black Friday game, we still have a couple primetime games to come. That shrinks the slate a little bit, despite the fact that there are no buys this week. We have no real there's no Christian McCaffrey. We have Travis Kelce. Like the spend ups in particular on DraftKings are kind of funky, right? Alvin Kamara doesn't feel that cozy. Like Stephon Diggs has he really been warranting an $8,800 price tag on DraftKings? I like him, but that feels weird. AJ Brown is amazing, but $9,000 is a little bit of sticker shock for AJ Brown. There's just like a weird texture, I feel like, to this slate where some guys who would never, ever be like really chalky on a lot of other slates will end up very popular today because it's just kind of an awkward texture. Are you feeling kind of the same thing? That's really what's been jumping out to me. And like I said, I like it. These are the slates I can win when I play these crappy Falcon stacks, right? Or DeVito stacks. But that's kind of what has been jumping out to me as like a little bit of a theme.
Yeah, I think so. I touched on it a little bit in my optimal stacks article. I spent like more time on that article than I usually do because there was a lot of stuff that was jumping off the page at me. And one of the things was like it kind of starting at quarterbacks that we're seeing like some of the largest ownership I can recall, like projected ownership that I can recall on quarterbacks and just different quarterbacks on the different sites. And so and part of the reason for that is it's very like scoring dependent, very pricing dependent on like who you're getting in the absolute like optimal lineups. And like it tends to be a ton of Trevor Lawrence on DraftKings, tends to be a ton of Jalen Hurts on FanDuel, and those aren't like bad plays. It's not like, oh, like scratch those guys off the list, they're nonsense. But it's very like pricing dependent. Like Trevor Lawrence is really well priced on DraftKings, not so much on FanDuel. Like he's like much cheaper than CJ Stroud on DraftKings. For example, CJ Stroud is less expensive than him on FanDuel. And so you can kind of carry this over because a lot of people, are going to want to stack their quarterback. So you're going to see like maybe very different ownership on the different sites. And that's not really what we want. Like what's going to win tournaments is really big scores, not the optimized lineups. So that means it's a really good slate to get different from like the optimal lineup. So like I think we saw last week, like the cash game lineup was really pretty good. And it kind of naturally like led you into this like Arizona Houston stack. And that stack, that like optimized lineup did pretty well. This week, I think it's, like that optimized lineup is probably not going to win both sites, right? Because like it's not can't be both an Eagle stack and a Jaguar stack, right? Like the Jaguar stack on DraftKings, the Eagle stack on FanDuel. So yeah, I think it's a good slate to get different. I do think the other thing that really jumps out at me about the slate is we've got 10 games, like 4 are really low point total games. Like we don't see like 37 point total games very often. We have 4 of them. Like in years past, we wouldn't see 37 point total games very often. This year, more so. So 4 really low point total games, 4 pretty high point total games, and the 8 quarterbacks from those 4 high total games are all very much in play. And that doesn't mean you can't go to like some of the other quarterbacks because like one of the other quarterbacks outside of those 8 is Patrick Mahomes. So, but there is kind of a limited pool of quarterbacks that I would look at in like single entry, and then million maker stuff. Kind of anything's on the table.
But I like that you mentioned, like, especially comparing it to last week, because last week was one of those weeks that come along every single season. We get 1 or 2 of them where, like you said, everything kind of converges with pricing. Obviously pricing comes out early. And so sometimes we get those injuries that we didn't expect, right? And I'm not saying that was necessarily the case last week, but it was this weird convergence of, right, the Cardinals got Kyler Murray back and they weren't priced for Kyler Murray being back. And the Texans were missing wide receivers and missing running backs. And like, it wasn't that it was, I don't want to say it was hard to fade those guys, but sort of. And you saw it come through that those guys did. I guess Tank Dell hit kind of a ceiling game and Devin Singletary was very good, but nobody hit like such a ceiling that you were like, oh my gosh, you know, you can't fade those kind of guys, but they were all still like very, very strong, generally speaking, for their prices, which then led you down the exact same roster construction as everybody else. It was basically like, I think Naked Purdy won the milli or something like that, or it was at least in contention there, which is really funny because Brandon Ayuk had a huge game, but Brandon Ayuk was a little more expensive, and you needed Calvin Ridley in that last wide receiver spot, and it was just one of those where it was much more NBA DFS style, where it's like I just need to fit the right pieces in from a price perspective that all things came together. Whereas this week, as you said, I don't want to say I don't want to play any chalk because I haven't finalized lineups. I'm not 100% certain exactly what I'm playing. I'm sure there might be a piece that is, you know, not super low owned. I don't need to play all 1% guys. But I do think this kind of slate, as opposed to last week, is one where I really, it's not that I don't want to be on any chalk, but I like really pivoting a much harder this week. Like I'm willing to play an entire team of low owned guys this week because I don't really think that they're that much worse than the chalk. Whereas last week it was like, dude, are you going to fade all the Texans and all the Cardinals and all the Jaguars? It was very, very tough to get like super duper contrarian and still make a really strong team. Whereas this week, like, I don't know. I got guys that are 2% owned that I think are like just as good a plays or very, very close to the chalk. And so I think that texture is just something that's important to touch on because we'll be right with the DeVito thing is funny. The Ritter thing is funny, but like we'll be touching on some of these guys who may be a little bit more contrarian than a normal week, but not a normal week, than a week like last week that, you know, like honestly, like Desmond Ritter last week would not have been a guy that I would have played even at this price in the same matchup, whatever. But because of the little bit of different texture, I like some of those guys a lot more this week. I see all your questions. There are some good ones. You guys are definitely, I guess, by, you know, what is this, week 12, week 13? By late in the season, you guys are picking up on some of the Galaxy Brain things we like to touch on. But really quickly, if you have not joined us before, now, A, welcome. B, drop all of your questions in the chat. We will attempt to get to as many of them as possible. If we do not get to them, crunch time is coming up after us. They will be here and get you locked and loaded with all your final questions leading up to lock. What we try to do here on GPP Final Takes is not necessarily go game by game, not necessarily go position by position. We kind of bounce around, as you just saw in what would be kind of our intro, our cold open or something. Bounce to the most notable tournament elements. Sometimes that is a game. Sometimes that is a position, right? Quarterback often can be a big one in particular because of what John said. It's very different site by site. And I think this slate in particular, quarterback is a little bit more important than before because of some of the consolidation of ownership, some of the low total games that John outlined. We will try to hit all of your questions in the chat. I'm going to hit some of those here in just a second. We are, however, as a GPP Final Take show, you would imagine much more tournament focused. If you have a cash game question, feel free to ask it. We will try to answer it. It will probably be a lot of us just going through the RotoGrinders projections and spitting out what is optimal in there. I want to actually start with some of these questions, and because there's some funny ones. But like I said, they play a little bit into some of the themes of this week. First, I want to start with not such a Galaxy Brain take, but Nick asks, we'll start here at running backs. He asks Isaiah Pacheco or Rachaad White. We will talk also FanDuel and DraftKings. Make sure, I think Luis is our resident expert in the chat, helping us stay on track and making sure that we hit both sites. But on DraftKings, these two guys are basically the same price, $6,200 for Isaiah Pacheco and $6,100 for Rachaad White, both in pretty good spots. Both, you know, Rachaad White much more so, definitely catches passes. How are you feeling about these two guys? Because they are on the higher end of the ownership totem pole, but they're also, you know, both pretty good plays, reasonably priced. What do you think about both of them? And do you have a preference between the two?
So I like both of them. I probably prefer Pacheco a little bit, probably on both sites. But this is going to come down to, like, Rachaad White is going to get his points and get there on receptions, right? So, and it's a good environment. I like that game environment. It's one of my favorite on the slate. It's one of the 4 higher total games. But it's going to come down to how many passes does Rachaad White get at the end of the first half and at the end of the game? And then does Pacheco get the touchdowns? So it's like Pacheco's touchdowns versus Rachaad White's receptions, and that's like too close to call. I lean towards Pacheco on both sites. It's highly variant, and I like both of those guys. Like I don't like if you maybe have something else in your lineup that leads you one way or the other, then go there. But yeah, I have a slate preference towards Pacheco on both sites. I think he's 100 more expensive on DraftKings, where the scoring is less suited for him. So I have a stronger preference for Pacheco on FanDuel, where he's 400 cheaper than White, and the scoring fits him better. So I guess a pretty strong lean towards Pacheco on FanDuel, very slight lean towards Pacheco on DraftKings.
I think that makes a ton of sense. Using those two guys as kind of a springboard, let's talk about the running back position. Like I said, this slate is very fascinating to me because despite the fact that you mentioned how many low total games there are, how we're missing, so many of kind of the fantasy superstars. We lost Joe Burrow. So even, like Jamar Chase or someone like that feels worse. Joe Mixon feels worse. Despite that, I actually find myself with quite a few different options that I'm pretty into. And like I said, I mean, those two that were just discussed, two of the more popular options, I obviously like. I see the merit in both of them. I think I side with you, everything that you outlined. And in general, it's never this simple, right? But like, give me the Chief in a good matchup versus the Tampa Bay Buck in a good matchup. Like I said, it's not that simple. Rachaad White plays basically every snap, and Pacheco filters out a little bit more. But I'm very much into kind of a Chiefs bounce back here against the Raiders. I think we have a little bit of that convergence of Raiders outperforming expectation against bad teams for the last few weeks since they fired Josh McDaniels, and the Chiefs doing what the Chiefs seem to do every single season. They hit this lull at remember, was it last year or 2 years ago? Within the last few years, it was the too high safety narrative was did too high safety solve the Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes, right? Because they fell into this lull where Mahomes was having 4, 5, 6 bad games in a row. The Chiefs weren't scoring a bunch, and everybody thought, oh my gosh, the league has solved the Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes. And shocker, they did not solve Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes. And so I'm pretty much into the Chiefs bounce back. But at the running back position, I actually find myself with a lot of options, even some of them in those low total games. But what if you had to start your tournament preference, not necessarily cash game preference, like who would be your absolute starting point at the running back position?
I think Jonathan Taylor is really well priced, so he's like dominating the ownership, I think. And I don't love the idea of playing with Jonathan Taylor against Tampa Bay, but I also don't hate it. And the price is kind of overriding the matchup for me. So I think to start at the running back position, I think you got to talk about Jonathan Taylor. Then I do think Pacheco's right in there, and he's got a pretty good matchup. I think that's a game where Kansas City could end up relying on Pacheco more so than Mahomes. We've seen the Chiefs aren't putting up these tremendous amount of points on the scoreboard. So I could see it being an Isaiah Pacheco game. A couple of tournament guys that I really like, Derrick Henry and DeAndre Swift. Henry, it's getting to be that time of year. It's a great rushing matchup. It just seems like something we're going to regret, right? We're going to look back and go oh, this is so obvious. Why do we not play Derrick Henry against, one of the worst rushing defenses in the league? And maybe, going back a couple of years, one of the worst we've seen. And so I think he's definitely going to get some opportunity. This is a game that Tennessee is favored in at home. It's all just adding up to a smacking ourselves in the heads and going, oh, we should have played more Derrick Henry. Then DeAndre Swift is a running back I really like for tournaments. Particularly on FanDuel, so he's a little bit better priced on FanDuel. The running backs, that don't get a ton of receptions are always score a little bit better on FanDuel. And I think it takes away from some of the Jalen Hurts. I can definitely see this a game where if DeAndre Swift gets the touchdowns instead of Jalen Hurts, Like if the wide receivers just aren't running out of bounds at the one, you know, and they're not doing the tush push, right? Like then it could very well be a DeAndre Swift game. I kind of wrote up in my article that if you took away Jalen Hurts rushing touchdowns, he's Russell Wilson this year. And I'm not going to like spend that amount of money on Russell Wilson at like potentially 20% ownership on FanDuel. And so, but if you take away those rushing touchdowns, you're probably giving them DeAndre Swift. So I like that kind of, if you're not using Jalen Hurts, maybe play DeAndre Swift as a counterbalance to some of the Hurts ownership. So yeah, those are 2 running backs that I like a lot in tournaments. But other guys like that people don't want to play, but I think are definitely in the conversation, like Saquon Barkley. I think you can play. I played him last week at King of the Beach. It makes sense that the Giants would rely more on him than Tommy DeVito. And you know, Tommy DeVito and the Giants actually had, I think in DeVito's first couple of games, like they looked terrible. But it was against 2 pretty good defenses. I want to say, yeah, he came in against the Jets and then, you know, played against Dallas and looked pretty bad. There was a game against the Raiders where, you know, in between where he also looked bad. But like this offense is maybe, you know, and we kind of saw it last week at the game against Washington. Maybe this offense isn't as bad as it looked at first, especially given, you know, now that DeVito has more time to prepare. So but that leads me more to Saquon Barkley than Tommy DeVito, if that makes sense. James Conner, another guy that like we're never like thrilled to play, but I think he's definitely in the conversation. That's one of those good game environments I talked about. Lean more towards like the Cardinals passing game, but you know, I think Conner always well priced. He's always getting the workload. So he's in there. And then Ramondre Stevenson on the other side of that New England Giants game that, you know, you obviously want to get billions of pieces of. You know, but I think, you know, Stevenson is in play. Like these defenses aren't necessarily defenses we want to shy away from. And you know, the Giants defense in particular hasn't looked that great. And so if this is a game where New England is controlling the 17 points that might be scored on both sides, then, you know, Ramondre Stevenson's maybe getting some run. I think that the Patriots defense is going to be, you know, somewhat popular. And so I think maybe pairing that with Ramondre Stevenson makes some sense.
Yep. I totally agree. I'm shockingly high on Ramondre Stevenson, which I don't know that I've played. I played Hunter Henry this year, and I think that's about it in terms of Patriots players all season. Like even in some of the better matchups or whatever, like I didn't play Pop Douglas the one week when he was real. I think that was against Washington. I just haven't been able to stomach the Patriots. And today we're breaking that seal. We are diving into Ramondre Stevenson. I know it doesn't seem like a big deal, but so first, go look at the Giants' run defense over the course of the last, the whole season, but in particular over the course of the last few weeks, you know, since the trade deadline. And of course, this week, they lost, or he is doubtful. I assume he is not going to play, but their best defensive lineman in Dexter Lawrence, who is like a monster. He is like a Pro Bowl, all pro caliber interior defensive lineman. They couldn't stop the run with him. So like what's going to happen when you remove their best player, right? It's like, it's not the same thing, but it's a little bit similar. If we remove Aaron Donald from the Rams defense, it's like, okay, this defense is held together by strings and, you know, duct tape. If we take away the one good player, it's probably going to be a tough scene for that defense. And so I feel as though the Patriots, you know, offense is quite bad, but they will absolutely just lean on those 2 running backs as much as they can. And this is not one of those games where they're really going to be pressured to do anything else, right? Mac Jones is starting. We know how bad Mac Jones has been, but it has been in much, right? You're against the Bills and the Jets defense and like those kind of situations. I feel like the Patriots can muster up enough points and it'll be mostly through the ground game. So Ramondre is one of those guys looking at 14% on DraftKings that I prefer to like Pacheco and Rashad White, not by like a crazy amount, but if I think that they're like really, really similar plays, give me the 10 to 14% owned guy as opposed to the 25% owned guy. So that's just like one of those examples. I couldn't agree. I don't have anything else to really add about Derrick Henry. I'm trying to figure out exactly what I'm doing with him because I agree. It's like 6,400 Derrick Henry against the Carolina Panthers. Like, I don't care about, you know, really anything. And the ownership is not that bad. Again, 4th in ownership on DraftKings. That feels pretty good. One thing I did, I guess I do have one thing to add to what you said before. If you kind of run through the Derrick Henry game logs and you look at the bad games, I think we just have to reset what Derrick Henry, like the perception of Derrick Henry. It's not like this isn't 3 years ago, Derrick Henry. He's not that level of player anymore. And the Titans are not that level of team anymore. Their offense is not as good. He's not as good. He requires a certain game script and certain matchups, and he can get run out of these game scripts, right? When you look at his bad games here, the Bucks, bad matchup. Jags, right, got ran out of the game script. Only 10 carries. Get down to these games where he doesn't get, run out. 22 carries for 100 yards, right? Steelers offense can't pull away from anybody. 17 carries and 4 targets. 20 fantasy points, right? 20 fantasy points, 20 fantasy points, 27 fantasy points. Like it's not perfect because he's not the same Derrick Henry as before, but in the games where they did not have the other team run away from them or face like a super talented run defense, he's been very good. And those haven't even been like, multi-touchdown games, right? He doesn't have any of those, any multi-touchdown games. If he happens to get that today and you get the 100 yards and 2 touchdowns, like he's just really a monster smash at 6,400.
Yeah, just to add on to that, we don't just need to like reset our expectations of Derrick Henry. Like they reset his price, right? Like his price to 6,400. Like he started the year 7,800 in years past, and after he goes on his late November, early December run, he's priced up to like 8,500, 8,900. So yeah, I mean, like they reset the price as well. So that's I'm highly interested in Derrick Henry in this matchup at 6,400. If he was 8,500. Like he's, or 7,800, like at the beginning of the year, maybe wouldn't have as much interest in a guy that, never catches a ton of passes. But like this is a Derrick Henry role game. And at 6,400, I think, he's just well priced for the matchup.
I totally agree. Another guy that I really, really like on this slate that I don't think on most slates I would be getting to, in particular for tournaments. KC brings up a great segue. Thank you, KC. Underdog tweeted 15 minutes ago. Let me see if I can find it really quick so I can find the real source of it from Rap Sheet. So take that with a gigantic grain of salt. But Rap Sheet said that the Steelers, with, of course, having just fired their offensive coordinator, longtime offensive coordinator Matt Canada, the Steelers fired him. And I feel like, it's easy to convince yourself of just about anything when there's turnover, transition, new coaches or whatever. But I think it's also a reasonable expectation to say, okay, let's look at the last 2 years. Let's look at this season. What Jaylen Warren has done relative to what Najee Harris has done for a team that's fighting for the playoffs is like, I'm not saying that's why Matt Canada got fired, because it's not. But like at a certain point, even Mike Tomlin, who loves Najee Harris, has to be like, we got to give Jaylen Warren a few more touches, right? Like everyone can see it. And the offensive coordinator just got fired, who had been giving Najee more of the touches. I don't know if Jaylen Warren is going to get any more work. It certainly doesn't hurt that there are reports out there that the coaches are saying they're going to give Jaylen Warren more work, but I'm willing at 5,400. A guy, he does catch passes. He's a home run hitter. He's one of the most efficient running backs in the entire NFL, which is kind of crazy on the Steelers. They're like the least efficient offense ever, and he's like the most efficient running back. It's wild how that all comes together, but I really do like Jaylen Warren in tournaments at 5,400 because even if it's a split, these are one of the situations I like to target. Not going to be super popular, priced fine. Even if it remains a split, he's good and the matchup is good and he can get there, right? He against this Bengals run defense that has been getting absolutely destroyed. Now the opposing team, that opposing Bengals team doesn't have Joe Burrow, so you're not really worried about like anything crazy getting out of hand, although he would probably be good catching passes from behind. But anyway, I'm willing to be like, I would rather buy now at 5,400 before we know if he actually did grow his role, because what's the downside? His role doesn't grow and I still get a chance to get 15 or 20, right? He scored 20 something fantasy points on like 12 touches last week. Like it's kind of like the Achane thing. And that was a epic disaster for me last week, but I did the same thing. Like I want to get on Devin Achane before the field is like, oh crap, yeah, he's back to 18 touches or whatever in a great matchup. And then next week we're paying, if Jaylen Warren gets set, let's call it 65-70% of this work in a great matchup today and has a good game, you're never getting him for 5,400 again, never getting him for that cheap and this low of ownership in a great matchup like the Bengals again, right? He's going to be 6,500 next week in a worse matchup, and then people will play him because now we know. I want to get out ahead of it, and Jaylen Warren is probably one of those guys that I'm willing to take that shot in the dark on, because like I said, the downside is he still has a role. It's not what I hoped for, but he still has a strong role and can still win me tournaments with a couple big plays.
Yeah, I think he's a good tournament play. I've seen like this. I've heard this information throughout the week that like I think I've read it a few different places. Jam to Win talked about it on our Friday show that like the two guys Steelers want to get more involved are George Pickens and Jaylen Warren. It still is a game with a 36.5 point total, but I just talked up a bunch of guys from the Patriots and Giants, so I guess I can't like throw stones.
Right.
So, and I guess the 19.5 point total is not like as terrible as it would seem in years past. I would have some caution that I don't think the Steelers offense is going to transform overnight into, like an efficient, like smooth running machine. But yeah, I think, Warren's pretty cheap. Like, I think if you are going under the assumption that like, okay, like Najee Harris is going to a backup role, like they're going to be using Jaylen Warren as the primary running back going forward. And, Pickens has some talents. I touched on Kenny Pickett in my article on the optimal stacks. I said like he's a guy that I think you could use in like super low ownership, like Millie Maker type tournaments. Because this offense looked much better last year. Like Kenny Pickett has like absolutely regressed. I think he had 4 games out of 12 last year of like 240 yards or more. He has 0 so far this season. So like this offense can do more. So yeah, I think you can go there. But I also don't think it's going to be particularly sneaky. Like I'm expecting like Jaylen Warren and George Pickens to be a little bit higher owned than we're seeing here, maybe at 11%. Pickens. I don't think Pickens is going to hit like double-digit ownership. But I have heard this information throughout the week that like Jaylen Warren and George Pickens are going to be the guys that the Steelers are targeting more.
Yeah. One thing I will say about George Pickens is I feel more comfortable playing into that narrative with Jaylen Warren because he has proven that it's basically just a touch issue, right? It's like he just needs the ball a little bit more. George Pickens has had games where he's gotten targeted. Like this is not something that is like, oh my gosh, he's the next Devontae Adams. They're just not throwing him the ball. He's part of the problem. like Jaylen Warren is the one guy who is probably not part of the problem on the Steelers offense. George Pickens, I'm not saying he's not talented because he absolutely is, but if he were so great at getting open and making big plays, Kenny Pickett would be producing more, right? And Matt Canada probably wouldn't be fired. It's not just because Pickett's not throwing it to him. He's not getting open. So that's an issue. Whereas Jaylen Warren is like, all he's doing is producing when he's out there. We just need them to realize that he's better than Najee Harris. So I prefer that one. I think really quickly, you and I like to dabble in these bad players, aka Tommy DeVito, aka Desmond Ridder, and such. What do you think about the Bengals side of things? I think more people will play Steelers. People will play Steelers defense against Jake Browning. Obviously, no Joe Burrow, no T. Higgins. But it's funny. I know that the downgrade from Burrow to Browning is massive, right? But we just had this situation where T. Higgins was out. The matchup is pretty good. The Steelers defense hasn't been anything awesome, certainly not in terms of what they allow for fantasy. And nobody's playing any of the Bengals without T. Higgins. I'm not saying I am either, but like Joe Mixon is the same price he's been all year, and he's been like chalk at this price, right? Jamar Chase is playing without T. Higgins. Tyler Boyd is playing without T. Higgins. Is there anything on the Bengals side for you as kind of like a pray that Jake Browning is not completely awful and can actually continue to produce for this Bengals offense?
I think the only player I'd be interested in, I guess my initial player that I'm interested in is maybe Joe Mixon. Like maybe it makes sense that they're just going to give the ball more to Joe Mixon. Something like, I guess it's a theme among the like Derrick Henry, Jaylen Warren, Ramondre Stevenson, Saquon Barkley, and now Joe Mixon. Like I'm okay playing running backs from like ugly looking games. because running back, if he gets 4 or 5 targets and he's getting in the end zone, he puts up 80 yards at a lot of these prices. That's fine. And so, Joe Mixon is somebody that I think you could go to and say like, well, maybe like Browning's not like airing the ball out to Jamar Chase as much as like Joe Burrow would have. And maybe that's not the game plan as much as it would have been if Joe Burrow was still there. I actually said like on my show, I looked at this game for a minute and I couldn't figure out why the game total was so low. And then I got sad, right? Because it's Joe Burrow. That's right. But I think Joe Mixon would be the first place I would go. If you want to do a Browning, like Jamar Chase, like George Pickens or Jalen Warren stack in the Millie Maker, like I think that's fine. Like I don't like a lot of times I look at that and say like that's you're probably wasting some money. I don't know. Like we just have no idea what to expect. I said, this game has more uncertainty than any game I can recall where we know both starting quarterbacks. Like sometimes it's like, oh, we don't even know who the starting quarterback is going to be, leading into Sunday. This one, yeah, because of the Jake Browning factor, because of the Matt Canada being gone factor, like there is like some uncertainty here. So if you want to play into that, like I think that's fine, and it's priced appropriately.
That's one of my favorite things.
Yeah.
It's
priced cheaply, but that's appropriate.
Yes, right. It's appropriate. It should be cheap, but no one is playing into it. And again, I'm not saying that Jake Browning is good, but I like to play into these kind of situations. And you don't have to play Jake Browning, right? You can play Joe Mixon or Tyler Boyd, and it's just like, okay, Browning is good enough, right? And like to get 8 catches for Tyler Boyd. Or to move the ball. He led 2 scoring drives, for sure 1 last week, I know. I mean, he had like 10 fantasy points in whatever, a half against Baltimore. Like, I know it was a little bit of garbage time and maybe 40 rushing yards is not sustainable. But I mean, shoot, you saw 40 rushing yards in a half. Like, he's clearly not unwilling to scramble, right? He's not Big Ben or whatever back there. It's like, he said, I just like the Warren. I hate it when the field is also playing into it, like Warren and Pickens, like you mentioned. But when the field is not playing into it, like I just feel like there's a lot of juice to squeeze out of this. Like maybe Jake Browning is not awful, right? How many times have we seen this? The backup is not as bad, right? It's typically been like in a little better situations than maybe the Bengals are, but. There's Jamar Chase. There's Tyler Boyd. It's a good, talented offense. They might be losing because their defense stinks. We've seen backup 49ers quarterbacks or different stuff. Like, I mean, shoot, look at DeVito last week. DeVito's the 3rd string quarterback, and he wasn't even good in college. He was terrible actually in college, and just lit up a good matchup. Anything can happen. And so, like you said, I'm not going to like go crazy on the Bengals, but I do think I wanted to bring them up because in large field tournaments, those are some of the kinds of things I do want to get into on this slate. Whereas like last week, right? Like, am I going to play Jake Browning over CJ Stroud and Kyler Murray and Trevor Lawrence and stuff? Like, yeah, probably not. This week, it's a little more interesting to me. The aforementioned Trevor Lawrence and CJ Stroud is who I want to talk about next, because I think that game, rightfully so, but is going to be quite popular. Let me find it here in Lineup HQ. As you see, 15% ownership for Trevor Lawrence. I think just mispriced, and that's what we're getting at here on DraftKings with a $6,400 Trevor Lawrence. With I think I've mentioned this probably on every show we've done on the Sirius show that we do on Sunday afternoon/evenings. I can't figure it out, but Zay Jones is apparently like the skeleton key to the Jaguars offense. When he's out, they stink. When he's in, they're pretty good. Not necessarily that he's producing, right? But when he's out there, the offense seems to hum a little bit more. Obviously, they have him back, and Calvin Ridley exploded last week for a second monster game of the season. But this game, we're going to be playing it into ownership, if we stack it up. Tank Dell is going to be very, very popular. Christian Kirk is underpriced and going to be popular. Even, Ridley, ETN, like you see on your screen here, what's that? 6 guys over 10, 11%. Like even Nico Collins isn't sneaking by people as like a contrarian pivot, if you will. What do you think about this game? Because I clearly understand why people are going to it, both price-wise, matchup, talent, all that kind of stuff. But also, like a lot of people are going to be playing into it.
Yeah, I think particularly on DraftKings, I think it's going to be overowned. Like I kind of look at it that there's 4 of these games that I'm really interested in stacking. I think you can go either way with the quarterback in each of the 4 games. But like this game, particularly on DraftKings, because it just jumps off the page in terms of like optimal lineups. I think I maybe want to go to the other games because I think they'll be lower owned, and if they each have about an equal chance of like rising to the top, I want to have one of the ones that's at lower ownership. I think it's fine. Like I think you say like there's a lot of reasons you can go to this game. And ownership isn't my favorite reason to like get off of something, but it just is in this case. When I see like 4 things that have an equal chance of hitting, and one of them's owned at like 40%, maybe combined ownership, or just kind of approximately owned 40% in terms of games. I want to pick one of the other things that has a 25% chance of hitting. Right, it's going to be lower owned. But I think you can play this game either way. I would just try to get different. Like particularly if you're using like Trevor Lawrence as your quarterback, I would like aim to get different somehow. Because I think it's going to be like a heavily owned in that regard. Maybe you go to the CJ Stroud side. Like maybe you're trying to get a little bit different with defenses, like whatever you're just make sure your lineup's a little bit different. But I think it's a fine game. I just think it has about a 1 in 4 chance to hit. Maybe a little bit less, maybe 1 in 5 chance to hit. And I think it's going to be owned kind of more than that, if that makes sense.
Definitely. I also think it's a little tougher to pinpoint than maybe the market is kind of dictating with or telling us with the story that our opponents are telling us with their ownership is that they know very confidently. Hey, isn't it funny? NFL DFS is funny with the pricing and all that kind of stuff, but like Tank Dell is $6,900 on DraftKings and going to be one of, if not the highest owned wide receiver on the entire slate. And it is warranted. I'm not saying anything negative about it. He's awesome. I love him. He's a great football player. The matchup is fine. But like this game isn't like, I'm trying to think of an example. Remember, we had a couple of times where the Bucks, when they had Jameis, played the Rams like multiple times where this is when I think it was Goff then, but it might have been the first year of Stafford or something. But like Bucks were this terrible pass funnel defense. Jameis led the league in passing yards, but also interceptions. We would literally on shows have the conversation of, can I play Buck stacks and the opposing defense? And like, it wasn't the absolute worst idea because he would throw a pick 6 every single week, but then he'd throw for 400 yards. And we would have games like that where it was like, are we really not going to like play this game, right? Even though it's owned, even though it's popular, you'd get like $6,200 Chris Godwin and like $7,700 Cooper Kupp on the other side, or Todd Gurley was there back in the day. Like the game was just so head and shoulders above every other one that you're playing it into ownership, and it just like, it makes sense. This one is not that to me. Like if we went back even like a month and you said, yeah, Jags Texans, everybody is stacking Jags Texans on a slate, I would be like, I mean, it seems fine, but like you said, it's like a 1 in 5, 1 in 6 chance of hitting, and I got to hit the right guys. And like, there's all these other games that I kind of like. I don't know. So I'm not trying to hate on that game. I clearly understand why everybody's playing it, but I think I want to go, if I'm going to dive into this game, I kind of want to leverage it, right? Like when I look at this screen and I see Tank Dell up there and Nico up there and Christian Kirk up there, it's like, well, that Zay Jones guy that we were just talking about is so the linchpin to this offense. Apparently, he's only 3,900. Like he's had like last year, he had like a freaking 40-point fantasy game or something, albeit before Calvin Ridley. But like, I kind of like playing into that uncertainty. Or Dalton Schultz, right? Dalton Schultz is the tight end. Tight end sucks every single week. There's maybe a few more options this week than normal with the Kincaids and McBrides emerging. But like, I don't know. It seems fine if I'm going to attack this game that Dalton Schultz has had 30 fantasy point games, right? Why can't he have the big game here? And he's 4%, 5% owned. I just like, if I'm going to play into it and say this game is really good, why is Dalton Schultz worse than Nico Collins? Right? Or why is Zay Jones worse than like, I'm going to play Evan Ingram? Like, when has Evan Ingram ever done anything to earn any ownership? Like since like he had one big game last year or something. So if I'm going to play into it, I like some of these lower owned pieces.
Yeah, exactly. I think my main objection to it is just Trevor Lawrence. Has one really good game this season. It was last week, so there's recency bias there. He had 2 rushing touchdowns, so it's like there's a lot of noise there. Like they played this team in week 3, and Lawrence threw the ball 40 times, and he put up like 15 DraftKings points.
Yep.
And so it's like this isn't one of those offenses that is necessarily going to go berserk. Like even last week when Trevor Lawrence had this Trevor Lawrence finally broke out. Like he had 2 rushing touchdowns. Like take those 2 rushing touchdowns away from his 32 points, and he's right back at 20 points. And it's I would just go with Matthew Stafford and do stack that game. I like that Rams Cardinals game a little bit better. Not because I think it has a tremendous chance to explode, but I mean it's just as good a chance as this Houston
Absolutely.
Game. Yeah. And optimizers are pointing to Trevor Lawrence so much because he's well priced. He's 6,400. But even then, I'd rather go with Baker Mayfield or Matthew Stafford or Gardner Minshew and just get different.
100%. All right, I want to get some more questions before we start to move on to some of these other games. This is an objectively funny a Freudian slip. Taylor Swift being on top of mind for everybody. Also a tight end related to not related, but correlated to Taylor Swift with Taysom Hill. But I want to talk about that. I want to talk about that game, and we can talk about Taysom. And I think we got the question earlier that I wanted to go all the way back to that I apologize for, but it was about my guy, A.T. Perry. There's one of my disgusting galaxy brain takes of the day. But on that game, we have Falcons and Saints, which I think is maybe not quite in that same conversation as the Jaguars game that we just talked about and the Cardinals Rams game that you mentioned. But when I think about this game and I bring all those things together, like we talked about with Jags Texans, where it's okay, they're well priced, right? Everybody's well priced. There's the Saints have guys out. Michael Thomas is out. Kendre Miller's out, which is not a big deal, but a little bit of a deal for Alvin Kamara, Taysom Hill. Obviously, Michael Thomas being out. A.T. Perry actually played the most snaps. He played more snaps than Chris Olave did last week. Michael Thomas played 2 snaps, I believe it was, and got hurt, and now he is on IR. The Falcons defense has been ravaged by injury. Desmond Ridder is back now, starting with Taylor Heineke getting hurt and then kind of sucking, and they're just they're pulling a Patriots. We're just going to bounce back and forth between these crappy quarterbacks and pray somehow one of them eventually plays well. But because of the benching, we got Desmond Ridder all the way down at 4,800. I know that Desmond Ridder stinks. I know people are probably absolutely sick of me talking about the Falcons and talking about Desmond Ridder. But when I pull this up and I say, okay, remove the name, remove the bias that we have about the Falcons and Desmond Ridder, I got a 30 fantasy point game. I got multiple 20-point fantasy games. And yes, some stinkers in there. But I got rushing upside. I got 4 rushing touchdowns, including a rushing touchdown in the brief time that he played last week. I mean, he scored almost 10 fantasy points, barely playing in last week's game, coming in after Heineke got hurt. In a dome, Saints are missing their probably best defensive player in corner, Marshawn Lattimore. I know that a lot of people don't like to talk about the defenses, but when it's a really big impact, like I mentioned, Dexter Lawrence, when it's Dexter Lawrence, when it's Marshawn Lattimore, not as much right now, but historically, when it was Jalen Ramsey, when it was, Stephon Gilmore, when he was in his prime, right? When it was those big Revis, right? If Darrell Revis was out or something, if that type of player is out, I will note it. I'm not going to oh my God, you have to play 100% Falcon stacks. But I will note those kinds of things. And I just think we got a little similar thing here where just the upside, right? Am I going to bet on Desmond Ridder being good, as a quarterback? And, what's the chances that he has a floor game? Probably about as good as anything else. But he's shown 25 plus point ceiling for 4,800. He runs. It's in a dome. The matchup is good. The stacks are really cheap, right? Do you want Travis Kelce? Do you want Stephon Diggs and AJ Brown or DeAndre Swift or whatever in your lineup? This game gives it to me. It's a totally free game stack in a dome with 2 not so good defenses. I like this one quite a bit. Not necessarily Ridder. But what do you think about this game? We got a bunch of questions about Bijan. If you prefer the run game, the Saints run defense has been worse. But then of course, Michael Thomas being out. What do you think about Saints and Falcons?
Yeah, so I think Rashid Shaheed is probably my favorite play from this game, and then like Chris Olave, and really the Saints like passing game is probably where I want to go with this one. I don't know, man. Yeah, you can make the Desmond Ridder argument, and you often have on this show. But I don't know. It's an indoor environment, so yeah, it's got that going for it. It seems like we're just waiting for Arthur Smith to be somebody different than who he is. It's almost like we're in a bad relationship, and like we need to like
that is for sure.
Yeah, he is who he is. And I just don't know that it's going to change. So you can, I think for like those, for the big 150 set, multi-entry, if you're playing the Million Maker, if you're going to be watching the Atlanta game, sure, play I would make sure you get the Saints passing game in there as part of this stack. And then I would like Desmond. If you want to do Desmond Ridder, like Drake London, Kyle Pitts, there is talent there. It's cheap, and it's probably going to be cheap in a few weeks too, because they're probably not going to do anything.
Yep,
and the talent will still be there, but
yeah, and me, I have gone back to this well multiple times, and I'd call it a coin flip. We've hit the good weeks at no ownership, but we've certainly hit the Desmond Ridder benching week as well. So we've hit the floor. It's a really high variance thing, but I also just love what it does from a roster construction perspective. And if I really like the Saints, which I do, like you said, I think any of these. I don't want to play Derek Carr. But I think any of these Saints are in play. Chris Olave obviously drawing the most ownership and also probably the best play, air quotes, best play. But Rashid Shaheed had 9 targets last week, I think it was. 9 targets last week. Obviously didn't turn it into much fantasy production. Derek Carr did get hurt, and Jameis played about half the game. Which Derek Carr's back and playing, which I don't even know if that's good or bad. I don't know what I want, but the Saints are bizarre, and Derek Carr and Jameis could not possibly be more opposite. Derek Carr has no interest in throwing the ball down the field or taking risks, and Jameis does not give a what. He is just slinging that thing all over the place. But Michael Thomas is out. Like I said, Kendre Miller is out. And so that opens up things, right? It opens up more targets for Olave and Shaheed. And A.T. Perry's going to play every snap. Shaheed is not an every snap necessarily player. He's going to play a lot, right? Because they played 3 wide receivers in most of their sets. But A.T. Perry's like the big boundary wide receiver, 6'4" or whatever. Big play threat, but also a big body. We saw the red zone touchdown from him last week. They don't really I love Chris Olave. He's an awesome football player. Shaheed's really fun. They don't really have why do we see so much Taysom and stuff from them? But they don't really have goal line options. Why did they sign Jimmy Graham? Because it's they don't have that guy down there to throw the ball to, right? When there's no Devontae Adams or whatever on this team. And I actually think A.T. Perry can kind of be that. I'm pretty high on his talent. He is my we'll get to the Chiefs and Justin Watson and guys like that. I do prefer A.T. Perry to some of these other punts. So I don't know that most lineups you probably don't need that $3,200 player, but if you do, I think Dean mentioned in the chat that there's double tight end is popping up in some optimals, which I don't think is bad necessarily. The tight ends are fine, but if I'm gonna save, I like doing it with someone like a Perry as opposed to kind of leaning into maybe an over-owned double tight end build, or certainly, in my opinion, an over-owned Justin Watson. If Justin Watson burns me, so be it. I'll lose. I'll move on to next week, and it's totally fine. But I'm not all that interested in that one. So I just want to bring up A.T. Perry. Let me see here. Shout out Eric is on Rashid Shaheed for 80 yards and a touchdown. I like it. Let's see. This is a fair point. Roberto says the Raiders have been playing better defense lately. One thing I will mention on that, as I use this as a transition into the Chiefs, is that I would recommend looking at who they've played. They're definitely playing better defense. And I think that makes some sense with Antonio Pierce in charge now, and just maybe injecting McDaniels must have been just an insufferable guy. Everybody just seems happier. The Raiders, what a mess. But I believe they have played Let me unfilter here and go to salary just so I can get the schedule right. If I go to the Raiders, we have played. So they did play a decent game against the Dolphins, gave up a bunch of yards against the Dolphins, but kept them out of the end zone more than we would expect. Before that, Jets, Giants. Believe it or not, most teams are going to play better defense against the Jets and the Giants. So I am not personally worried about the Raiders defense. And I actually think that some of the Chiefs, we talked about Pacheco before, but Kelsey, maybe a wide receiver, maybe Mahomes, are some of the better tournament plays on the slate, just because it's, like I said, it's this convergence of, all right, Chiefs have had some struggles. The Raiders maybe look a little better than they actually are after a couple of good games against bad teams. And like, it feels like this is a game where the Chiefs put up a big number. What do you think about the Chiefs and just this game in general?
So my favorite thing from this game is just Isaiah Pacheco. I think Mahomes is interesting. I think he's going to see like pretty low ownership, but like he's never going to see really low ownership. So It's a question like, can Patrick Mahomes ever really be under owned? And that's probably not going to happen. The Justin Watson thing, I think, is like appearing in optimal lineups since Kadarius Toney got ruled out.
Yeah.
So I think that's like boosting him up. And like, I mean, yeah, he's 3,000, so that he's got that going for him. I don't like buy into into the 11 like targets. Like I'd much rather play like try to get to Rashee Rice or Travis Kelce. But like the problem with the Chiefs all season has been like, oh, they're super expensive. And now we kind of have this track record where they're not like lading up the scoreboard, and they're still winning games, but they're not like lading up the scoreboard like they have in years past. And they might just be willing to, especially against the Raiders, like if they get out to a lead, it just feels like a game where they'd be comfortable handing the ball off to Isaiah Pacheco, and that's not necessarily going to go poorly for them. So like, why would they stop doing it? And they don't have like the Tyreek Hill there anymore, and it's going to like just lay up the scoreboard. And even though they're not even trying to score, like, oops, like Tyreek Hill just took it to the house. Like it's just not that kind of offense we've seen in years past, but it's still kind of priced like it. And like I don't know, like it's like Travis Kelce is always going to be like the highest projected tight end when he's on a slate. But again, like he's kind of getting there more with like receptions and like these monster touchdown games. Like if you have the money to get to Travis Kelce, like he's the highest projected tight end, like I think you should go for it. I'm not going to try to like throw in some like 3,000 wide receivers that I don't like to get Travis Kelce this year.
Yep. I think that makes perfect sense, right? If you have a stack or like some construction that it's telling this story that happens to include A.T. Perry, or honestly, if you're stacking this game, right, you just say maybe you do believe Mahomes is under-owned and you do like Justin Watson more than we do. Maybe you like Josh Jacobs or Devontae Adams on the other side. If you like that and you have that cheap guy who fits like the story of that lineup, and then Kelce also fits within there, by all means, do that. I agree. I'm very interested in Travis Kelce this week because part of me is like, we're also, we're doing some of the recency bias thing with like the Jaguars, like you mentioned, but we're also doing it a little bit with Travis Kelce. And maybe it is like starting to become the end for Kelce, and maybe the Chiefs offense isn't quite as good. But I mean, a month ago, he scored 40. He scored 40 fantasy points, right? He went 23, 24, 39 in terms of fantasy points. And so and now it's the Raiders. They, for whatever reason, they really struggled with a couple of these defenses that the Broncos and stuff that I did not expect them to struggle with. But like I said, I just feel like this is going to be one of those games where the Chiefs have a big game. Does that mean it's Travis Kelce winning tournaments at 8,200 on DraftKings and 8,300 on FanDuel? Not necessarily. What I will say is Luis brings up, thank you, Luis, for FanDuel. I do like him a lot on FanDuel. I have some of these pieces that allow me to get to Travis Kelce. I don't have to play Mahomes, right? On DraftKings, when you're the same, we've talked about this a lot. When you're the same price on FanDuel as you are on DraftKings, that tells a pretty distinct story, especially at tight end, where the pricing gap, right? The floor for pricing on FanDuel is $4,000 at the tight end position. And so an $8,300 tight end compared to and generally we don't have a playable, let's call it 5,000 is somewhere in the 5,000 range is the best cheap tight ends on FanDuel. So when you're 8,300 as Travis Kelce, that's not that big of a difference. It's a big difference, but relative to even like Michael Mayer in this game for the Raiders, he's running a lot of routes. He's not doing a lot of stuff for fantasy, but he's playing basically every snap at 2,800 on DraftKings. And so that is like Trevor Lawrence, right? Like I can play Trevor Lawrence and Michael Mayer, or I can play Travis Kelce on DraftKings. And that is just such a big difference. And so with touchdowns as well, I know he's been getting there a lot, as you mentioned, with receptions, but like Travis Kelce can score 2 touchdowns. That's not even a problem. So I do like him a little bit more on FanDuel. I want to hear you mentioned Cardinals Rams, and I want to hear kind of your thoughts on that game, because I find that game to be really interesting for tournaments, because like if this weren't a salary cap game, or we didn't have to necessarily pick some of these weird plays like on the Rams side in particular, and even the Cardinals have been a little goofy with Hollywood Brown being worse with Kyler Murray, this game would seem awesome. Right? Rams defense, not that good, but the Rams score every single week. Cardinals have Kyler Murray back and a bad defense. It's in the dome. But like I'm finding it difficult to like put the pieces together in a lineup, if that makes sense. So how are you kind of focusing in on this game?
Yeah, so actually I really like this game. It's got one of the higher point totals. Like the point total for this game is just 3 less than like the Bills and Buffalo, which is the highest on the week. 3 less, I guess, tied with Jacksonville, Houston. So 3 less than that. Rams are favored by 2. So I prefer going to the Matthew Stafford side. It's a tournament play that can bust. Like Matthew Stafford's not going to be getting you like some kind of safe rushing floor. But I do think they are the favorite team here in a relatively high point total game. This offense is like healthy and like all together for the first time in a while, like months. So you've got Cooper Kupp there. I think Cooper Kupp, like I played him last week at King of the Beach, burned me. But I think that's going to give a lot of people hesitation. Cooper Kupp was his last 4 games under 7 DraftKings points. But there's some explanation there, right? Like Matthew Stafford was hurt, Cooper Kupp was hurt. But like Cooper Kupp is a guy that we are accustomed to seeing put up like 30-point games. He's already done it this year, so we know he can go there. Like Puka, somebody I tagged, I think he's going to be underowned. And so you can just like pair those guys with Matthew Stafford, see what you get, and you're probably going to get some of the Rams or some of the Cardinals on the other side, like either Marquise Brown or Greg Dortch or James Conner. I kind of like Greg Dortch. I know he's not everybody's favorite. He's a 5'7" wide receiver, but I actually think that kind of gives him a weirdly safe floor. Like as long as he's in the game and getting snaps, like because they kind of have to scheme him the ball a little bit, so he gets these like wide receiver screens and stuff.
Yep.
So I like Dortch. I mean, Dortch is not a guy I'm going to be going crazy with and playing like 40% of my lineups, but he's cheap and he's got some upside. I think Marquise Brown may be my favorite of the Cardinals wide receivers, which is a little bit obvious, but I think that maybe the injury questions will keep him lower owned than he should be. And then Trey McBride, obviously. Yeah, sorry. Like Trey McBride is the natural run back there at tight end. I think that he's, with the best value tight end, again, going on like probably the 4th, 5th week in a row. But he's getting opportunity. So I like this game a lot. I would play it from the Rams side with like Stafford, like get Kupp or Puka in there, maybe both of them. You can run it back with Trey McBride. That seems as likely to hit to me as like some kind of like Trevor Lawrence, Tank Dell run back or Trevor Lawrence, like Nico Collins, like run back. And it's going to be far less owned.
I totally agree. I think that, and on the opposite side as well, I know it hasn't been super pretty to start, but like $6,900 Kyler Murray versus $6,900 Kyler Murray at, or $8K, I guess, Kyler Murray on FanDuel at 5, 6, 7% ownership, when like I said, it hasn't been super pretty from a passing perspective. They're definitely working through some things with him coming back, but that's to be expected. he could have had in this game here against the Falcons. I know it's woulda, shoulda, coulda. It's always easy to go back and say, oh, they just missed a long touchdown and look how different it would be. But also, like, it's relevant in that this isn't like a Jets situation where like they're just not moving the ball and completely incompetent. Kyler Murray could have had a long home run touchdown to Marquise Brown in the Atlanta game. And in that situation, then he probably throws for 300 yards plus another touchdown. Hollywood has a good game. Last week against Houston, struggle a little bit. But look at this. 84 rushing yards and 2 rushing touchdowns in these first two games. So like it's mostly just like a timing and, you know, comfort thing for Kyler. It's clearly not health because the guy's running around just as well as he has for his entire career. And you're getting him completely unowned. And as you mentioned, there's 2 Rams wide receivers who have shown tons of upside. I mean, Cooper Kupp for the last several years, Puka for this entire season has shown monster upside. I know it's been difficult to peg when both of them are in there, but like also that is the pass game. Like if the Rams are going to succeed throwing the ball at all, it's one of them two or both, as you mentioned. Like it's over for Tyler Higbee, right? 2-2's fun. He might, you know, catch a touchdown or something like that, but like they're not going to win with 12 2-2 targets, right? They're going to win with Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua. And so like, I'm willing to keep going back to Hollywood. I'm willing to go to those cheap Cardinals wide receivers. As you mentioned, Rondale, what a funny run out it's been for these couple of Rondale games. The one game he gets 1 million targets and then everybody plays him the next week and he gets no targets, but he caught the long touchdown pass. It's just, the ebbs and flows of these things are very funny. But then as you mentioned, Trey McBride, really easy bring back at a tight end position that we don't love. And he has 25 plus point fantasy upside, you know, in any single matchup. It's just like everything again in these Cardinals games fits really well. Neither defense is good. It's in a dome. The price seems fine. To me, I don't have a problem with the pricing for anybody in this game. It's just like a little bit tricky to pick each, other than McBride, I guess I would say. You're like, you don't feel super cozy about any of these guys, whereas like Tank Dell gives you the right. You click Tank Dell, you're like, yeah, I feel good about clicking him in. You click Kupp in, you're like, dude, Kupp hasn't had a good game in like a month. It does at 8K, it doesn't feel great, but like this is still Cooper Kupp and this is still the Rams and this matchup is good. So I really, really like this game for tournaments. I think, like you said, this feels like maybe even higher probability, but certainly like on par with the probability of the Jags-Texans game in terms of winning me a tournament. Like this game stack feels like the same. Like let's just call them, they're both 20% chance of winning me a tournament. And no one is playing this game and everyone is playing the Jags game. So like to compare the two, I think it's really funny. I just want to shout one more guy in this game, and it's Kyren Williams. I have him tagged here. I've been waffling on whether I was going to remove that tag or not, because they did give us some reports later in the week that these freaking teams, man, with these reports, it's kind of like the Jalen Warren, George Pickens thing, but it's so vague. It was so vague from McVay, but he's aware that he has to be smart about Kyren's usage, or it's something along those lines. Basically saying like he knows that Kyren's been hurt. Like shocker, we all know that Kyren's been hurt. You're the head coach. You're away. Like I get it. You know that, but like they have never, when they've had their guy, right? When Gurley was there, when Cam Akers was there, when Kyren has been there this year, sure, maybe he doesn't play every single snap, but McVay is very much a workhorse kind of a guy. And so like if Kyren's healthy, I think we see a big workload. And look at what this dude was doing with that workload all season before he got hurt. He was one of the best fantasy backs. I think he was like 7K or something before he got hurt and like 45% owned in a worse matchup than this. And now he's 6,600 in a great matchup and nobody's playing him. So I think it again takes a bit of a leap of faith, like some of these other guys that we brought up today, but this is a great slate to take that leap. Like I don't have to fade $5,200 Devin Singletary. I don't have to fade 5K Tank Dell. I got to fade 6,900, right? And I don't worry so much about Devin Singletary. I think that there's a lot of merit to taking that leap of faith with these guys, and Kyren fits that bill for me. Anything else on this one before we move on?
No, yeah, I think you said it well. I think it's a good game to go to. Has as good a chance to hit as the other games we're seeing on the slate, and at far less ownership. And I think it's like a recency bias game, maybe on both sides, right? Where But like with particularly with the Rams, where people are like, oh, it's just been so long. But there's been a reason each week that I'm going to give them a pass for the previous weeks. And so it would just not be a shocker if this is a Cooper Kupp 25, 30-point game. So just keep that in mind.
Yep, I totally agree. I did not see the Roth update, but Matthew asked, are we concerned at all with the weather in Philly? I don't know if you have checked that out, but we should talk about that game as well as we, kind of start to wind down, because obviously that is the one game, like from an actual football perspective, and certainly from a scoring perspective, that looks really, really good. Obviously on this slate, we have Bills, Eagles, great real life football game, but also I do think it fits. I really like your DeAndre Swift call. He's one of my favorite running backs. We briefly touched on him earlier, but also the Bills passing game is certainly not sneaking by anybody. But like, they're not going to come out and try to win this game on the ground. I don't think. Maybe they will. I don't know. They fired their offensive coordinator. Who knows? But it feels to me like a Swift feels like a really good play on the Eagles side, where I think everything that you outlined earlier, people should go back and listen to that, because it's perfect from a leverage perspective and just like a fluky. They can't possibly keep going. It's like Jamal Williams. We can't possibly keep going down at the one, right? Every week, they're going to have somebody go down at the one. That seems crazy. So Swift fits there. But the Bills passing game looks really good to me. Obviously, Kincaid at tight end with Knox still out. This is the cheapest we've seen Gabe Davis in a long time, and it's certainly warranted, but we know that, he can catch long touchdowns at any given time. And then Stephon Diggs, it feels uncomfortably priced for me, but he might be my favorite wide receiver on the slate. He's certainly up there in a spot where, man, the Eagles' pass defense has just been really bad, and I expect the Bills are going to throw a lot. So what do you think about this game? And as I pull up the weather here to check on that.
So the weather is basically no wind, but it's going to rain. Wind, I think, is a much bigger detriment. Like really high winds, bigger detriment to game totals, I think, than precipitation. Like as soon as it's like you see heavy snow or rain, and you think like, oh, I need to get off this game. Like you start seeing the defensive backs like slip, and the wide receivers are running down the sideline for touchdowns. And that's not going to always be the case. Like I wouldn't go bet the over because it's snowing or raining. But it's just you don't know how it's going to play out. And it's also, this is off and on showers that could occur during the game. So it's probably going to rain during the game. I kind of like the DeAndre Swift side on the Eagles more so than the passing game anyway. So the Eagles give up the most receptions per game in the NFL. And that is a defensive thing that they do. And they're not going to change it, right? They're not going to change it to try to keep points down in it.
And how teams attack them, right? They have the best front seven, give or take, the best front seven in the NFL. You can't run on them, and it doesn't make a lot of sense. They're also right. That makes their front seven a little bit better. So you throw outside, right? If you're going to try to beat them, look at what Washington did. Why is Washington scoring so many points on them? Is because they come out, they throw it every snap, and they throw it outside the numbers. So exactly what you said feels pretty good for the Bills.
Yeah. So actually, I really like Stephon Diggs in this game. I'd like to be 2 or 3 times this 8% ownership. And because I think people are thinking Eagles really good defense. I want to shy away from the Bills. The Bills seem like they're in turmoil or whatever. I'm not buying that. I like the idea of playing Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs. That was kind of the main write up in my article yesterday. Is I really like pivoting off of Jalen Hurts and going to Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs, and then running that back with Swift. I think that's a way to start a lineup that's going to be really low owned and has really high upside. So that's my way of playing this game. I think Dalton Kincaid is really in there as one of the better value tight ends. I think tight ends have not necessarily had the success against the Eagles this year that the wide receivers have had, but that's. That can Kincaid sometimes acts as more of a wide receiver anyway. So I, not shying away from Dalton Kincaid, but I just like Stephon Diggs as at single digit ownership. Give me all those Stephon Diggs at 8%. And I think that is a play that I'm interested in for single entry for 3 max, 5 max, whatever you want to do, qualifier. It's just that's my way of playing this game. And I think the Eagles are going to have success. But it's probably going to come on the ground, and it's probably, I think Swift is going to be too low owned, and Jalen Hurts a touch too high owned if he is like hitting like 20% ownership on FanDuel.
Yep. I love it. It's kind of crazy. Maybe I have a bad read on this game and this slate, but I think that the Hurts and Allen ownerships should be flipped. I think Allen should be higher owned. I understand the Bill struggles. Like I understand all the texture that comes into this. I prefer Allen straight up to Hurts on this slate. I prefer Diggs straight up to the Eagles wide receivers on this slate, and that's not what we're getting from an ownership perspective. So it's one of those rare. This doesn't happen all the time, right? But the rare situation where I legitimately prefer. I would rather play Allen, Diggs with Swift than Hurts, AJ Brown, Kincaid, or whatever. But I like that better. It's a lot of the times, like you said, I don't like to do anything just because of ownership, but sometimes you do have to I'm going to play this leverage play, right? Everybody's playing the Eagles passing game. So I'll play leverage with Swift or whatever. Sometimes you just have to do it to be, exploitative in your lineups, but you don't actually love, you still love Jalen Hurts, AJ Brown. This is one of the rare spots where I'm I don't know. The best play is leverage. I can play a great tournament tactic, and I also actually just prefer that stack, that build.
Yeah, exactly. It kind of sums up the week. Is that I think that I don't know that I've ever had a week where I really disagree with projections so much. And that's good for us because people build lineups based off of projections for the most part. So many of these, of the max entry players are using these projections, and I just question them this week more than I generally do. And a lot of it just comes down to, I think, pricing. This is not NBA where you need super efficiency. You're going to see outlier scores, not point per dollar scores, right? So go for the guys you think can put up big games at low ownership. And I think Stephon Diggs is right in there, paired with Josh Allen. Just a lot of things seeing Mike Evans, seeing a lot less Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. And I think Mike Evans is a good play. Somebody I was just looking at Derrick Henry, somebody that maybe is not popping off for a point per dollar thing, but man, this matchup seems like the kind of one, kind of game we're gonna be smacking ourselves in the heads. Why did we not play Derrick Henry against a bad rushing defense at home as a favorite? Just some things to think about. Gotta be comfortable getting away from the projections.
Super duper quickly, I just wanted to hit on a couple of those. We talked about a lot, and there's a lot more guys on this slate that I seem to like, I guess, than I would have thought an hour ago. But I just want to hit a few things that we didn't touch on. I know Broncos and Browns is an absolutely disgusting game, but not the same as Derrick Henry. But I was going to say similar to Derrick Henry. Jerome Ford is not similar to Derrick Henry. Let's get that out of the way first. But you have a Browns team that's clearly going to lean on the run without Deshaun Watson, and the Broncos have a really terrible run defense. So it's kind of a similar situation. I put him in the Ramondre and I'm trying to think of who I'm missing there. The Warren, Derrick Henry. There's all those running backs right there. That is I don't know. I like Pacheco, but these guys are half the ownership or a third of the ownership to a Pacheco or a Rashad White. And I like those guys. I'm trying to just quickly take a look. We didn't touch on Buck. I wanted to hit Bucks Colts really quick. Another good game environment, I think, to just about everybody in that game, I think is playable on both sides. Maybe not Colts tight ends, but everybody in that game is playable. We didn't get a chance to talk about that one a lot. So maybe these three fine young gentlemen will touch on that one for you guys. And before we start to pass it over, before I get some winners from Brit, of course, and Luch and Andre gives us some fun tournament plays, I do want to get Squirrel's flag plant hot take. What's the tournament winning thing today? I'm particularly interested this week because I believe last time you mentioned Tommy DeVito, and then obviously he somehow hit for a freaking 30 fantasy point game. And I think this is a fun tournament slate. So curious to get inside your mind and what you're prioritizing kind of in the tournament landscape.
So I'll go actually on the board, right? Or a little bit more on the board than Tommy DeVito. I'll just say Stephon Diggs, 12 receptions for the first time since 2018.
Oh, now that is fun. I love that one. I am going to before my real flag plant, my Galaxy Brain flag plant. I really like your Rams Cardinals take on that game, and just loving that game. It to me just screams like an amazing game environment. And if we went back 2 weeks or a month and we said Kyler Murray's playing, right? Hollywood's playing, Stafford's playing, Kyron's playing, Cup is healthy. And we went through all that. And you said, yeah, but nobody's playing that game. Like nobody's playing anybody in that game. We'd be like Hollywood's been chalk for like multiple weeks, right? Kyler was chalky the other week. And like all of a sudden now this is the matchup where nobody's playing any of these guys. That seems Trey McBride, I guess people are playing Trey McBride, but like, I don't know. The whole game seems pretty fun to me. That one. And then my real hot take, like people don't come here for me to tout Cooper Kupp. It's A.T. Perry. That's my guy on the Saints. No Michael Thomas. Going to play basically every snap on the outside. Pray to God Derek Carr is not incompetent today because I think A.T. Perry can play a little bit. So this isn't just just punt it off with Justin frickin' Watson. I think A.T. Perry might be a decent player. But that's enough of me rambling. Luch, how are we feeling this morning? How are we feeling about this slate?
It's going to be fun. I'm with Squirrel. There's ownership in places projected ownership in places I kind of didn't expect it. So maybe I'm going off the grid a little bit, but it makes it for a really exciting tournament appeal when you're kind of scratching your head on some projections and where the public might be going. So I'm excited. And no, I'm not playing Cooper Kupp this week after he burned me last week at King of the Beach. So I think I don't know. I like some other pieces in that game, Squirrel, but it was good to see you last week.
Yeah, good to see you. And we were on the Cooper Kupp experience together in the 4 p.m. games. Did not go well, but it's all good.
Brit, what do we got today?
Hold on. You stole some of my thunder with the A.T. Perry because mine, I was coming in on, it's not A.T. Perry, it's a Justin Watson. Maybe I understand Justin Watson from cash games, but from tournaments, he should not be the second highest. No. This is absolutely ridiculous. You've got Perry, you've got Dortch. There's a couple other 3K crappers out there. Mix it up. Don't be scared out there in the tournament streets. And then from a betting perspective, I think the scores and odds freebies, the Texans money line, I'm going to throw in the Ravens -3. Ridiculous that they're just 3-point favorites.
I agree. Is Andre here? Is he frozen? Are we? Excuse me. It looked frozen to me. Andre, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Andre needs to reset the router. Kick him out, Steve. We can
take the cartridge out. Take the cartridge out. Blow in it and put her back in the Nintendo. But obviously, Andre will be back. These guys will take you home. Squirrel and I got to get out of here. We'll see you guys next week. Peace.
All right, Luch, what is going on? We're gonna wait for Andre to come back. He'll reset the router, close all those extra browser tabs he has going on. But what's up, dude?
What's going on, man? It's going to be a fun week. Looking forward to it. Came home from King of the Beach and my girlfriend rescued 2 kittens. So right now I have them in the room beside of me and hopefully all hell doesn't break loose.
I thought you were going to say something bad because a long time ago I went to a car show and my girlfriend moved out of my house while I was at the car show. So I'm glad it worked out the better way for you than something that happened to me a long time ago.
I'll settle for the cats.
Yeah, the cats is a better outcome. I mean, my life's good now, but that was just I thought it was a bad turn, and I'm glad there's kittens instead of that happening to you, Luch. We'll see if Andre comes back. But real quick, there's a lot of things I got to tell you about. The first thing here at RotoGrinders is the props and pick'em package. There's a big team. I contribute some. So does Luch. You can check it out. It's at RotoGrinders. It's a limited time discount. The experts at the RotoGrinders projections team take our stats, comb through the market for any inefficiencies. Through mid-November at NBA, NFL, and NHL, we're up 38 units in expert picks. You can use the model yourself, see which lines are off, find them, and how likely the prop will hit based on our tool. Check that out. If you want more of the other stuff, you can go to Scores and Odds, get all the spreads, all that fun stuff as well. But that's the first of a couple of reads I'll have here. But I guess as a whole, like, what are we doing? What games are we doing? Some of the ownership you mentioned on looks pretty off to me. I'm not sold on Trevor Lawrence. He's basically, it took a week 11 game against your Titans with 2 rushing touchdowns for him to have over 20 DraftKings points. I mean, that's a long time to have 20 DraftKings points on the season. We're all the DraftKings cash team, by the way, too. Are we all $100 off from the team we actually want to play on DraftKings? That's what I think we all are. You have to make one concession. Trevor Lawrence is probably on that, although I'm personally not sold on it. What do you think of his ownership being the highest owned quarterback going into this week against your Titans?
There's Dre. What's up? We can hear you now. Yep.
Yeah, you hear me?
50-50. It seems like you're here. You reset the router?
I had to disconnect it. My internet's been acting up for the past hour.
That's always the fix in DFS shows is resetting the router. But yeah, Luch, actually here, Andre, What's going on, man?
Not much, hanging in there. Slate, hopefully ready to win $1 million, but we'll see.
Yeah, always. Do you have the $1 million parlay? We don't need all the legs on it, but are you still trying to do that?
I still try to do that at times. I haven't had time to do it this weekend since I've been busy with work, but my other job, I should say. But yeah,
I go for the 100,000. You're just throwing a couple plus thousands, and you're basically there at a few clicks on there. So I try. I haven't hit it yet, but we'll see how it goes. Luch, I want to get to you. Let's jump right into the slate for cash games. Quarterback. I think most people on DraftKings, Trevor Lawrence looks good. Spending up, probably a little difficult. I think I would take Josh Allen over Jalen Hurts. I want to know, too, Lane Johnson just got not just an overnight downgrade, like a couple hours before the game downgrade to questionable with a groin injury. I would pretty much expect him to not play, honestly, from the Eagles. That's a reasonable downgrade for basically everything on the Eagles offense with him out. But I wanted to note that to everybody. So not really paying up on DraftKings. On FanDuel, you can get up to Jalen Hurts. If you have the money, I think I prefer Josh Allen to there. But this Trevor Lawrence chalk is basically just because he's cheap. I was just talking to you. Took him all season long, a game against your Titans, and he has 2 rushing touchdowns to have his first big game of the year. I much prefer Kyler Murray on DraftKings for $500 more. I much prefer getting to like a Josh Allen, but it really messes up the cash build. What are we doing with him today?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not playing cash, but if I was, I would not play Trevor Lawrence. I was looking at FanDuel. I agree with your DraftKings analysis there. If I was playing FanDuel, I'd rather play someone like CJ Stroud, who has a super high floor. The Jags that we just talked about are giving up a ton of passing yards this season. And I was on the fence. I'm playing 3 main lineups. I was on the fence about making a third. Then when I looked into CJ Stroud, I bought in. So I think Stroud is going to continue his success, and I think he's super safe. I'd rather play a guy like Stroud than Trevor Lawrence this week in that same game.
Yeah. What are you doing, Andre, with that game, specifically Trevor Lawrence, more so as high ownership on DraftKings this week, projected to be the highest owned quarterback?
I'm getting to Trevor Lawrence right a good amount. With my builds, it's kind of hard for me to get away from it. It's still cheap, even if I cap it a little. But I do like Lucia's approach going to CJ Stroud a lot. So I'm getting him a lot. I'm trying to get Jalen Hurts on too. So like the 2 main quarterbacks I'm trying to get to, followed by Minshew and Baker Mayfield after that. And
who do you prefer in that game? Because I'm pretty strongly Baker over Gardner. Gardner, I mean, he has some really single-digit fantasy point games, quite a few of them. Baker, they're going to pass because that's what they do. They can't run the ball. I think White is still a pretty reasonable running back with his high pass-catching ability. But I think if I have to pick a quarterback in that game, I think on DraftKings you could go down to Baker or Minshew in cash. I would prefer Baker in that specific build.
I definitely probably prefer Baker more so right now, just for the simple fact of the situation with White. He tweaked his knee on Friday in practice and just put him on injury report just to be cautious of everything. Yeah, he's active, he's going to play, but if you tweak it on Friday, who said that you can't tweak it during the game? So I might be more so with the Baker side, just because you can definitely bring a pass catcher back from Indy regardless, but Baker's going to have to probably throw the ball a lot more, I think, this game.
What else, Luch, would we be doing here today? Because, I see Kyler Murray sub 10% on, CJ Stroud sub 10% on DraftKings, Patrick Mahomes, right, almost sub 5% on when everybody's playing Justin Watson. I don't know. There's only 20 quarterbacks, so there will be a couple of guys that are low owned. It gets really, really gross towards the bottom. I think, if anything, I would lower my ownership from a large field perspective if I was running maybe through the Sims or lineup HQ, things like that. I would lower some of my Trevor Lawrence, maybe a little Jalen Hurts, and get some more of the CJ Stroud, Kyler Murray, Patrick Mahomes tier.
I 100% agree. I do have a couple of large field Trevor Lawrence starts, but I made sure the rest of that lineup was a little bit different and correlated. But no, I'm with you. I can't really argue anything different. I mean, you see Gardner Minshew's really cheap, has some lineup HQ expert tabs next to his name. Should be a decent game environment. I'm just, we'll get into running back there, but there's a lot of ownership in that game, and I can't knock it. It should be a good game environment. I do like some pieces in that game. I'm not sure that I would, play Minshew in cash games unless he was carrying 15 to 20% projected ownership. But there's a lot of spread out ownership here. Josh Allen, We know what his floor is. I don't know if I'd go there in cash. I do love Allen for tournaments, but there's so many per dollar options that allow you to get in the, higher floor studs at the other positions there. So I'm with you. I really, we don't want to keep beating the same drum here, but Kyler Murray, cheaper. If you want to play Lawrence, that's fine, but I'd rather play Stroud or Kyler in cash today.
All right, Andre, real quick, your thoughts on any other quarterbacks, and then there are some really trash names at quarterback. You have a best of the garbage pile here.
I do definitely not have the best of the garbage pile. I eliminated those ASAP from our player pool today. But I do want to also say Matt Stafford, I think it's a nice tournament play today. I know he's probably going to be hardly owned, so I think you definitely roster him in tournaments. Like you mentioned with Kyler too. So those are the guys I'm looking at. Patrick Mahomes, he plays well against his Vegas team in his career. He's had really good games against them, so I wouldn't count him out. Granted, it's hard to find pass catchers for him, but I do like pairing him today with like a guy like Rice and Kelsey, so that we don't have to worry about the Watson guy pairing him with him today. But I think if you do that, that's a way to get different in tournaments as well.
Luch, my garbage pick is probably Levis against Carolina. I like Henry too. Henry's probably going to do some big damage today. But if he's not, Levis, one, he can run it in a little bit. And then two, it's very easy to just throw him in with DeAndre Hopkins. You don't even need to bring back from the Carolina side on that one. Because some of these names, are you going to play a Kenny Pickett, a Bryce Young? It's garbage down here. Levis is probably my cutoff.
Yeah, I'm not playing any Will Levis, and I do think he's going to have a good career. There's no offensive line in front of him, but if there's any matchup, where you can see some kind of remnants of that Atlanta game where he went off, it could be against Carolina. But I do think it's going to be a ground attack game. I do think it could be Henry or dare I say maybe Tajay Spears and some Millie darts, and we'll see what happens. So I'm with you. I'm not huge on that point of the quarterback pool, but if gun to head I had to pick one, it would probably be Levis.
All right, before we get to running back, I got to tell you guys about our friends at FanDuel. Crunch Time is presented by FanDuel. You can bet $5 on any money line, get $150 in bonus bets if your bet wins for new users in Arizona, Colorado, Illinois, Indiana, Iowa, Kansas, Louisiana, Maryland, Massachusetts, Michigan, New Jersey, New York, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Tennessee, Virginia, West Virginia, Wyoming. Terms and conditions apply. Must be 21. Gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. All right, Luch, I'm going to stay with you on running back because you said you were concerned a little bit about some of the ownership, and we've got two of the running backs in the Tampa Bay Indianapolis game garnering the highest ownership here. So one, what are we doing with Jonathan Taylor? In theory, right, against this tough Tampa Bay run game, I'm struggling with this myself. I'm probably playing him in cash simply because he outtouched Zach Moss like 4,000 to 1 last week. So we know he's basically getting all of the work, and all of the work, even against a good run defense, when he does get some touches in the passing game with some touchdown equity, he can certainly get there, and his price is reasonable. But for tournaments at like coming in 35, 36% on DraftKings, I believe he's the highest owned running back on FanDuel as well, coming in at 40+%. I usually like the highest owned running back of the week for tournaments. It's pretty, historically the best spot to eat the chalk. But I don't know. There's a couple ways for him to fail. How are you handling that?
Yeah, I agree. I'm more of if there's a mega chalk running back, I'm playing him in cash games. I think you play him in cash.
I'm definitely playing Jonathan Taylor.
You set it and forget it there. For tournaments, I have three main lineups, and I don't have him in any of those three lineups right now. I do have a bunch of large field darts where he was popping up a little bit. So I have some mini stacks in that game with him. But, I'm not thrilled about the matchup. I get it, though. The game environment should be pretty good. Anything can happen when Michael Pittman hypothetically gets tackled at the 3 or whatever, and Taylor dumps it in twice, and everybody's pissed off by 4 o'clock. There are outcomes for both ways, but at that ownership, I just think there's so many other places you can go at running back today. You mentioned Derrick Henry. If there's any kind of positive game script that maybe Tennessee could have, it could be today. So I think Henry's interesting. Kyren Williams, this guy was a machine. There's a bunch of unknown there with him coming off the IR, but solid matchup. I'm expecting maybe 15 to 18 touches from Kyren Williams in this game, so I'd rather go there. Pacheco in the Kansas City game. listen,
I love
he's
Pacheco.
ran a little bit more ownership than I would like to see there, but I think he's interesting. And then like the 5K range, I think there's some really interesting names there. I don't want to steal all the thunder here, but James Conner is still the bell cow. Eventually, he's going to have a 2-score game. Ramondre coming off the bye week against a bad Giants team, and New England should have some decent field position. I think he's interesting. And of course, the offensive coordinator change. The Pittsburgh Steelers heard Twitter, got rid of Matt Canada, and maybe Jalen Warren will do some damage. I don't expect this to be, an 80-20 kind of thing. I still think Najee will get about, 10 to 12 touches, but really exploitable matchup against the Bengals. The Bengals couldn't stop a nosebleed on the ground, so I really do like Jalen Warren, and I'm trying to ignore the noise to stay on him.
Yeah, you get I think there's some weather in that game, and then you get possibly short fields with the backup in there for Cincinnati against the tough defense. I can certainly get behind Warren. I don't know if a split field halfback deserves 15% ownership, but I understand it from a price perspective, specifically on DraftKings today. Andre, what are you doing with Jonathan Taylor? I know Luch mentioned Pacheco. I love him today with McKinnon out. His pass game work has sort of dwindled. I would expect that to probably see a little bit of a tick up this week. I'm still on Rachaad White. I know you're down. I think it was more precautionary. They don't want any Bijan Robinson nonsense having the league coming to talk to them. So if there's anything going on with anyone the rest of the season, they're going to show up on the injury report. We had that with Burrow too. These teams don't want to get fined. They don't want draft picks taken away for doing anything deceiving on their injury report. I'm still with White, very effective in the passing game, more so of a DraftKings play for me than FanDuel. But I mean, the price on FanDuel is still pretty nice, and he's had a nice run of games. But yeah, Jonathan Taylor for you, what's the ownership look like? And then everybody else.
I'm still getting a good amount of Jonathan, trying actually to reduce it if I can a little bit. And like I said, I just want to go more so the passing attack in that matchup. Even though Indy on the running game, the ground shows really, really high, and the efficiency for their O-line versus that defense is really good. It's a positive matchup for them. So I might want to just be at the field instead of being over the field right now, which is where I'm getting to. But I think he's still in a good matchup. I think especially they're going to keep feeding him like 30 times. So I don't mind that at all. But I do like getting to Kyren Williams a lot. I just got to trust the fact that the coach is going to keep him out there a lot. Let's see, with them getting rid of Henderson Jr., not having him out there a lot. So I'm going to go with him a lot more here in this situation. I do like Pacheco, as you guys mentioned before. I think that it's a good play too as well. I do also want to get to a good amount of DeAndre Swift. I think that's kind of a little bit of a different approach, but I want Pisa Philadelphia. I think that he has a chance to succeed here in this spot against Buffalo, who has not been that great this year to run too as well. And I do want to get a little bit of Roderick Stevenson just against the Giants, just for the simple fact that the Giants are missing a good amount of people. Missing someone against big on their defensive line. I think he has a chance to put up a big spot, and then also having 20 attempts last game against Indy. That to me was his highest attempts that he's had all year today. So to that point, along with 5 targets to go with that. So if he's getting the ball 45 touches, and same thing in this situation, there's no reason why he should not have. So I look forward to.
Yeah, he could easily repeat the game Brian Robinson had last week. He does have to deal with Zeke in the backfield, but I could certainly see Ramondre. I think I bet him, it was like plus 4,000 for the highest rushing yardage total on the slate. Something like that. I mess around in those for fun once in a while. I got that in a pre-show. I think either DraftKings or FanDuel. Anyway, I'm just rambling on one of the 800 million bets I make on a weekly basis. Anything else? I do want to. I am both with you both on the Kyren Williams. I would play him straight up over guys like Josh Jacobs. Jacobs has a lot there's ways that can go south for Jacobs very quickly. I'd play him straight up over Bijan Robinson. I like Saquon. I'd play him straight up over James Conner. He does cost more. They don't want to get him 95% of the work was the quote, but they'll give him 85% of the work, I think, without question this week. And it's a really nice matchup for him against Arizona coming back. Anyone else, Luch, you wanted to hit on at running back? You got any like sleeper running backs? Usually not the spot you want to get like sub 5% on guys too often, but like a Jerome Ford, a Javonte Williams. I don't know. It's pretty ugly you get down here. But basically, Jerome Ford's probably the last guy I'd mess around with.
Yeah, I mean, like super large field stuff. I think maybe Tajay Spears. Yeah, I wouldn't mind having a couple of shares if you're 150 and just with the matchup, the potential game script, and how bad Carolina is against the ground, Tajay Spears is the real deal. I think I think you could see at least 2 rushing touchdowns out of Tennessee this week, and I don't know, it just feels like a good
It's
Millie.
December. Well, is the end of November December for
I don't know about
Derrick
this year,
Henry?
buddy. It's pretty ugly this year.
Well,
I
yeah,
saw
it's in wins, and guess what? Your Titans. I like the Titans to win. I like them to cover the spread, so it's December. I love Henry today.
I don't know, man. After I watched Maserati Marv yesterday, I'm at the point where I'm like, wow, do we want to keep going the opposite direction here?
All right, let's go to wide receiver. My take from the top of the show, if you missed it, is Justin Watson's ownership. So one, Justin Watson for cash. Yes, I understand it. He's 3K. He saw 11 targets. I would imagine Luch is like even money for Justin Watson to have 11 targets the rest of his career, right? Is probably like a reasonable line. He's not going to do that. There's a couple people out. It's against the Raiders. And he's basically the only guy who's shown anything at the wide receiver position and sort of trust targets anything from Patrick Mahomes all year. So I understand that. But it is absolutely ridiculous that he is the second highest owned wide receiver in large field tournaments. You've got Greg Dortch, you've got A.T. Perry. If you're just looking for cheap plays they're only a few $100s more. Both of those guys are on 1% ownership. Don't be afraid to mix it up with Justin Watson from a tournament perspective. I absolutely love Michael Pittman. I think he's deserving of being the highest owned wide receiver this week. Extremely consistent. If he gets a touchdown, you're in store for a very good week. A great matchup against the Tampa Bay secondary. You can play Jonathan Taylor and Pittman and, I don't know, soak up, 250 yards of total offense, I think, today for the Indianapolis Colts. We've got Tank Dell up here as well. I think he's still worth it at 6,900 on FanDuel, too. I'm finding ways to get him onto my cash team over on FanDuel as well. I think he's well worth it over there. Maybe you have to sacrifice a defense on FanDuel. I'm okay doing that to get Tank Dell. Kirk, I sort of understand he is the wide receiver schematically that you would probably want to play this week against Houston. And his price is reasonable, so I understand him garnering ownership. Andre, if you had to take a stand, let's take Justin Watson out of the equation because I think he's clear. He's just so clearly to me the receiver I would be most likely out on in terms of ownership. But between Pittman, Kirk, Dell, I see Josh Downs garnering the second highest ownership too. By the way, the over, I think I put it on Scores and Odds at 43.5. It's only 44.5. You can go get that on any sports book right now because I do like the over in that game. But these guys in the top of ownership, Andre, which one would you be most likely to maybe take to not use as much as the rest of the field?
And this top ownership wise for the wide receivers, goodness gracious, I'm probably gonna. That's tough. I'm probably gonna say Kirk.
Kirk. Luch, to me, it's like
because they got both those receivers there, and if the narrative, because it hasn't worked since it's been there, really has been.
It's not Pittman or Dell, Luch. To me, it's like. It's Downs, Deontay Johnson, Calvin Ridley, Demario Douglas. These are the guys I would have no problem going more underweight on. Like the second tier of the ownership are guys like I would have Deontay Johnson. I saw there was a tweet is like 1 touchdown in 3 years, right? Like what are we doing playing Deontay Johnson? In terms of upside, I understand that a little bit, but the second tier Olave, if Jameis was in, I'd be playing Olave, but with Derek Carr, it's a lot more iffy. This second tier of wide receivers in terms of ownership, I'd be much more apt to kick these guys down the ownership tier, up my Tank Dell, Michael Pittman, and then really spread it out elsewhere.
Yeah, I actually really like Josh Downs this week. I mean, he had a lot of time to get healthy. He's not on the injury report whatsoever. Before he got like a little more banged up with the knee, he was having a hell of a year. And I like attacking this Tampa Bay defense on the outside. So I think Josh Downs is a guy I would keep in the player pool. I like him quite a bit. I agree on Olave. Was really hoping we'd see some Winston to unlock Olave here, but it doesn't look like we're going to get that. I like Houston a lot today. Jacksonville plays a lot of zone, a lot of cover 3. CJ Stroud's been so damn good against zone defensive cover. I mean, he's been so good in general, but specifically against cover 3 and zone, using some fantasy points data info. He's been absolutely tearing it up. So I like Tank Dell and I like Nico too. And I'm envisioning Tank Dell carrying a lot more ownership than Nico, but I think you could even double stack at those prices if the game goes nuclear. So I do like Houston a lot. We didn't talk about them a lot yet.
Yeah, you can certainly swap instead of playing Dell would it surprise me at all if Nico was the highest scoring receiver on that team at half the ownership? Absolutely not. And he's cheaper, so it gets you more money to do something else. I think Pittman, Dell for cash, right? With Watson on DraftKings, that's a nice little core. If you need to save a couple of bucks, you can throw in Kirk. Probably Downs, probably not a cash game for me, but that's towards the top on FanDuel. Let me hop over there real quick. You're probably playing one of Tank Dell or Michael Pittman. You can try to get both. You can get up to a Diggs or Brown. Do you guys have a preference at the top, Diggs or Brown, from the people that are spending up? The last show, they sort of like Cooper Kupp a little bit too. In terms of raw fantasy points, you got to pick one today. Andre, I'll go with you. Who's your favorite guy at the top?
To spend up, my favorite guy to spend up with the top today. Yeah, it's probably going to be Brown. If I give you a choice between those two, I just think AJ Brown's due for a bounce back game against the spot, and I just think Diggs is really with this team at this point. Honestly,
what do you like, Luch? If you're spending up, do you go with one of Brown or Diggs? Cooper Kupp's drawing some ownership too after a letdown week. Was he going to be fine? Was he going to be not? On the injury report, he ended up being okay. Puka as well. I don't know. It's hard for me to project both of those guys to have massive games like the projections are, both of them in the top 4 or 5 in terms of raw projections. That seems a little high. How are you on those?
Well, I love the Bills, and I know Roth has some rain in the forecast there, and I'm just going to play the Bills anyway because I circled this game like 3 weeks ago. Yeah, I know there's a new offensive coordinator. I don't know how much is going to change, but before Brady took over, like they would just freak out and abandon the run. And they're not going to run the ball against the Eagles anyway. So I think Josh Allen can throw the ball 50 times in this game, potentially. And I think, you'll talk about A.J. Brown due for a bounce back. How about Stephon Diggs? And this Eagles secondary has been getting shredded all year by guys like Sam Howell. No offense, Sam Howell's been great for fantasy. My bags are packed for underdog. I got so much Sam Howell. But here comes Josh Allen. And I think there's a big ceiling here with him, and especially at Stephon Diggs' ownership. I mean, there's a lot of good mid-tier options across the board at receiver and running back for tournaments. Me and Dre touched on all these 6K guys, so it is a little more, tricky to get up to Diggs or AJ Brown. But I'm loving Stephon Diggs this week. I think he does his thing. I'm not saying the Bills win, but I'm expecting a ceiling game out of Diggs today.
Yeah, you mentioned Josh Allen pass attempts. Not that I had bet it or anything, but I did. And it was 35.5. You can go get the over, I think, on most of the sports books today for Josh Allen. All right, let's get to tight end. Then we'll take some questions. Andre, tight end, first cash games for me. It's McBride or Kincaid. I think on both sites, price, you can pick either one. It's not worth spending all the way up. The low end is pretty gross for the sub 3K tight ends. Michael Mayer, probably the only guy. I think he's 2,800 on DraftKings. That looks reasonable, but it's pretty much just McBride or Kincaid for cash games. But for tournaments, I've got DraftKings pulled up. This is 56% of lineups, Andre, are going to have those two tight ends. Are they warranted? Are you doing something different? Are you even there? I can't tell. Andre, are you there?
Yeah, can you hear me?
All right.
I'm just saying so, that's all. But I do like McBride a lot today. In tournaments, I'm trying to get a guy Dalton Schultz and guy like Taysom and also Kelsey if we can. I don't mind taking those options. I think those are really good tournaments. Evan also a great one as well. But I would use so with back in this.
Yeah, Andre, I'm going to cut you off. You're really cutting out. I don't know if you can disconnect and reconnect. Try that, but we'll go with Luch for just a second here. Luch, real quick, same question to you. McBride, Kincaid, these guys drawing massive amount of ownership. Are they worth it from a tournament perspective? I definitely say so. For cash, I probably lean McBride personally.
Well, I have a Kyler build with McBride and an Allen build with Kincaid, and you guessed it, Stephon Diggs after the last segment. Was really debating on either going Kincaid in another piece or Shakir in a different tight end. But then I came back to my senses and realized Kincaid should just keep getting peppered with targets. Although Shakir is really interesting for large field tournaments if you're looking to get off the Justin Watson train. He's one guy we didn't mention, and an easy, cheap run back with potentially A.J. Brown or DeAndre Swift is Shakir. Yeah, I mean, those are kind of, good plays. Evan Ingram has been hot and cold, but I do kind of think he's an interesting cheap run back for Texans Bills. I don't know if I'll get crucified for this, but I know people might be looking for a cheaper punt tight end. I have a Michael Meyer team, so am I in?
He's
am I
like
out?
the only one I think that makes sense.
Yeah, so I'm in on him, and then maybe Kate Otten if we're going cheaper game environment. If you like Baker Mayfield, you could throw Kate Otten in there potentially too.
Yeah, the Mayer 2800, it just opens up. It allows you to get to the higher tier quarterbacks, or if you want to play a Diggs or an AJ Brown, it just makes those guys so much more attainable if you go completely punt at tight end. And generally, that is what you want to do on DraftKings. But the high quality tight ends, right? We've seen the Travis Kelce's, the Mark Andrews, 8K, 7K. I mean, you have them in Trey McBride and Dalton Kincaid right now at much lower prices. So I think you can sort of substitute those guys into. If you had to play one of, you got a single entry team, Luch, and you're looking between McBride or Kincaid, would you play one of those or would you go with somebody else?
I think it just depends on your quarterback. So it's quarterback dependent for me. But I mean, now that Hollywood's in, I mean, I still like McBride a great deal. Right. So, but I think Kincaid is a little tougher to get to. So I like him for tournaments as well. It's tough. I'm playing both of them.
All right. Andre, are you there?
Yeah, I just trying to fix my internet.
All right.
Be better?
You're still crackling a little bit. Let's try to see. You got any other tight ends you might want to play on the lower end that aren't McBride or Kincaid?
You hear me now? Hello?
Yeah. Hello? Verizon? Is this Verizon?
Just want to make sure, but I just want to play at the lower end. That's really, I'm not going to get any lower than that. I do like how it's a little bit too.
Andre, you're real bad. I think I'm gonna make a decision. We're gonna cut Andre from the show. It's just I can barely hear him. Let's go ahead and do that. We'll finish this out with just you and me, Luch. Maybe Andre, if you can reconnect, that would be great if you can get that done here. So let's go to defense.
Right.
Let's go to defense, Luch, real quick. So everyone, is it the Chiefs or the Patriots on DraftKings? The team everybody wants on DraftKings for cash is $100 short, right? I don't know if anyone knows what we're talking about, but the team that we would all be holding hands with is $100 short. So I can't get to the Chiefs defense. I have to go to something below that. But if you had to choose between the Chiefs or the Patriots against the Giants towards the top, what would be your preference there? Those guys looking like they're garnering like 40% of the ownership on DraftKings right now.
I guess it's the Chiefs. I will tell you one thing I'm shocked about defense-wise is that nobody's playing the Texans. I guess it's because of all the
I am playing. They're so cheap. They're my cash game defense on FanDuel right now.
So I have some Texans, and we've seen it how many times in the past 3 weeks. Doesn't matter if they give up 30 points. If they get the takeaway or the defensive touchdown, you can still be optimal. You saw the Friday showdown with the stinking Jets. So like you said at the top of the show, Trevor Lawrence finally had a good game. He sucked out with 2 rushing touchdowns. Like to get the lineup I want, especially if you're playing like 3 max stuff, don't feel bad about playing Houston.
No.
It might not be the prettiest thing on paper, but it's such you're playing defense roulette at this point. So I have three main teams. I have Houston on 2 of them. My other defense is Pittsburgh for tournaments.
Yeah, I like. I think I prefer the Chiefs over the Patriots. The Chiefs, pretty good history this season of putting up reasonable points, and now they get. It's against the Raiders, division game. I don't know. I'm not really sold in that Raiders offense. The Chiefs get plenty of sacks. They have plenty of pressure if it gets out of hand. I think I would prefer the Chiefs straight up. If you can, I do like the Texans, 2,600. I mean, on FanDuel, they're 3,300 or something. And that just makes everything. That gets me That gets me the Tank Dells, the Michael Pittmans, get me the running backs that I want, the quarterback that I want. I'm willing to sacrifice a defense, no question. Yep. A couple other interesting ones. If you don't go to the Texans, would you rather, let me pull up on basically, here's a decision I had. And if I have this decision, I'm going to assume maybe a couple others do. Would you rather play the Falcons D at 2,900, the Jaguars D, or go all the way right down to the Texans at 2,600?
Does it help you out elsewhere? Does salary relief help you out or no?
So you can't get the Chiefs. So with the build everybody's going to want in theory in cash on DraftKings, you have to go 3K or below on DraftKings.
I'd probably roll, man. I'd probably go with Atlanta if I had the salary with Derek Carr in, and he's just looked atrocious for the most part.
All right. I would agree with that one personally.
But it's
So,
close. I mean, I have no problem with Houston. We can't sit here and say that Trevor Lawrence looked good all year, right? What have
no,
you done?
I mean, he's not. He hasn't been. He has not lived up at all to his billing as a number
No
one draft
problem
pick.
with
And I
either
know,
of them, but Atlanta, I think it'd be my go-to by a nose.
yeah, that's my team currently as well. All right, let's try to get to some questions. You can either go in the Discord, you can go in YouTube. Real quick, let me tell you about the Sim Labs beta. We just dropped the beta version of a new NFL lineup building tool, and for a limited time, you can try it for free. That's right, free 50. Sim Labs, it's a brand new product that generates DFS lineups through the power of simulation. It combines data from every aspect of the slate to churn out lineups that match your preferences. In a few clicks, you can have hundreds of well-built, correlated lineups for whatever contest you're playing. Check it out in the link description below. You can go to Discord. There's a free channel for that as well. It's not always going to be free. It's a product the team's always working on. There'll be more sports eventually, but it's a different way to lineup build, not in Lineup HQ. You use the Sim Labs, and it's a really cool product. Go give it a check while it's free. All right, questions, Luch. Let's get to as many as we can. I'll go to the Discord first. Maybe some of you people can go check out the Sim Labs beta. Let's go to the live stream chat. Amateur Hour, 3K for defense, playing Raiders in both. That's probably on FanDuel. I would really try to get the 300 for the. I much prefer the Texans over you. You don't sack Patrick Mahomes. He has thrown some interceptions because his receivers are so bad, but I would play the Texans defense over the Raiders 100% of the time. But Luch, I am literally fine if you're playing a large field tournament. Any defense can make it happen.
Yeah, I agree. 100%.
All right, a couple more. Let's see. Can you play 2 tight ends in a FanDuel tournament today? FanDuel, probably not. DraftKings, you can make it work. FanDuel, 2 tight ends pretty much is always a no.
Yeah, I mean, you could play the question was 2 tight ends, right?
Yeah.
I mean, on DraftKings, I really debated on playing Kincaid and McBride together, but
yeah, a lot of people are going to do that for sure.
Yeah, but I'm not doing that. It's viable though, but it's not for me today.
Derrick Henry, DraftKings cash. So he's my 4th running back for me today on DraftKings, and I couldn't get. If I went to like the Texans defense, I could probably get Derrick Henry in over maybe a Rashad White or a Pacheco, but I love Pacheco's receiving upside today with McKinnon out, plus rushing equity and touchdowns. I think that's there for him. I like Derrick Henry. I think he's just the 4th guy for me in cash, but I would have no problem. I wouldn't call anyone a donkey playing Derrick Henry today in cash on DraftKings. He's way too cheap.
Yeah, no, I'm with it, and I think they'll be able to get the ground game going, so I have no problem with Henry today.
All right, Falcor wants to know single entry: Rashad White and Gabe Davis, or Derrick Henry and Justin Watson.
Gabe Davis, man. I mean, Gabe Davis is
this is a Gabe Davis game. If there's a Gabe Davis game, this is it.
I agree. Gabe Davis is the large field Millie play. I do think Rashad White is fine, like injury wise. I'm with you. Like if I had to guess, I feel like he's okay.
All right, let's do. Who Mike wants to know: FanDuel cash Pittman, Kupp, and Trey McBride, or Nico, AJ Brown, and Kincaid. So I'm not on. I'd have to see personally. I couldn't get up to the high tier wide receivers on FanDuel, but I like Pittman and McBride, and I like Nico and Kincaid, and I think I prefer AJ Brown over Cooper Kupp today. So I'd probably go number 2.
I don't think I would play Cooper Kupp in cash unless his ownership is higher than.
He's definitely the last of the high priced wide receivers.
Like Cooper Kupp's a tournament play, especially after last week, and I don't know. So I wouldn't play Kupp in cash. I think there's guys with safer, higher floors who are like confirmed healthy for sure.
FanDuel single entry: Jalen Warren or Amandre Stevenson. So this is tough because Warren, like in all of the advanced metrics, he's literally like the best, right? So this season, but Stevenson could get 25 touches. Jalen Warren's not getting 25 touches in this game. So what do you want? You want the guy who's really, really good this season so far in limited touches, or do you want Ramondre Stevenson against the Giants?
I mean, I'm kind of getting like A-Chain vibes from Warren, and partially because in a good way, and partially because the Bengals are so bad against the run. I was trying to pull up the adjusted yards before contact data, but I couldn't get there in time. So I like them both. I have shares of both, but it's crazy. I think Warren has a slightly higher ceiling this week.
Let's see, Allen or Hurts on FanDuel cash. So I would like Josh Allen. I do not have the $400 to get to Josh Allen from Jalen Hurts. So I'm on Jalen Hurts. I cannot defeat the salary cap on FanDuel with Josh Allen today. But I would like to get to Josh Allen. I just I'm not going to sacrifice anything else in my lineup to make that happen.
And just backtracking a couple of thoughts. I don't think anybody's going to play the Eagles defense, but if I'm playing large field stuff, as much as I like the Bills, like I think we've seen turnover. Josh Allen has entered the chat quite a bit this year, and there's some weather there. So I think it could be, a high fantasy point producing day for Allen, but I do think there could be some turnovers in that game too. So don't mind the Birds either.
All right. You got, they're looking for a couple of prop bets. Your favorite prop bet of the day, Luch, currently as it stands.
I have 0 bets in today.
Luch, what is wrong with you? Come on.
Yeah. No,
you got to have at least 200 bets in on a Sunday.
I don't. We'll stick this weekend. We have kittens now. I got burned on Thanksgiving because Jared Goff wouldn't look at a wide open Jahmyr Gibbs the whole game. I don't know why.
Yeah, so. The whole team was on that one. I followed you guys into it, but that one did not work out. All right, I'm going to go my favorite. The only 2-unit prop I have is Devontae Smith over 56 or 7.5 receiving yards without Goddard at tight end. He does much better. Schematically, he's a better fit this game. If you look at the pressure stats, which the Bills are good at, he's much better than A.J. Brown. So all things point to a very, very nice Devontae Smith game. And I don't even hate Devontae Smith. If that was someone you landed in on FanDuel, is basically your last wide receiver for cash, I am certainly okay. But whatever Devontae Smith's normal line is, and then I think on either DraftKings or Caesars, you can get him at 100 at plus 550. Go get that one as well. Let's see, a couple more. Don't see any more on YouTube. I'd have to go way back. Broncos D, yeah, I think Broncos D is fine. Certainly like them today. The Browns quarterback is atrocious. Probably like he doesn't throw the ball downfield. Probably won't throw too much. So you're sort of losing some of the sacks, some of the interceptions you want. So it's not particularly like, and Denver can't push the score right against the Browns to make it like 21-0 at halftime. So it's these are the things. They're not my favorite. I much prefer like the Chiefs. I much prefer probably the Patriots, but there's ways certainly that the Broncos D gets in there. I would just prefer some of the other defenses. Does that make sense, Luch?
Yeah, I'm with you.
Let's see. Any more? Nico Collins or Calvin Ridley today. This is interesting. I'm all over Nico. I want everything in that Houston game.
I like Collins too, and for some of the same reasons we saw Ridley go off last week. I do like Adam Thielen as well. We didn't really talk about him, but
Calvin Ridley is close to Adam Thielen's range. That they are both elderly NFL. Ridley just had like 2.5 seasons off or something like that, or 1.5 seasons off with injury and all of that. I don't know. I think Adam Thielen's season might be over, Luch. It's like that was the first half of the season.
I think he has a big game today.
All right. So, yeah, that'd be a very contrarian take to fire it up in some tournaments. Granted, everything just locked, so we can't actually have any actual info on that, but we'll see if Thielen comes in. Let me see. I'll give you guys a couple more bets. Let me bring up the scores and odds page for some of you people. Steve, if you want to throw it up on the screen, we'll see what I'm on from scores and odds. The Texans money line, that was the freebie. I hate when I go up against other experts on the other side, but I think I saw who was it? Nick. I never want to be going up against Nick. He's one of the, I never want to see. He's on the Jags, but I'm on the Texans. We're going to battle it out today. I'm on the Texans. I mentioned your Titans. I think the Panthers, they're literally atrocious. And this is Mike Vrabel after 3 weeks on the road and they're coming home. Your Titans are not going to lose today, Luch. So feel free to go back that up however you want to. You don't have the faith. You don't have the faith. Do you want them to lose?
I don't know at this point. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm big on the Titans and the Ravens for sure. I don't know. I should have made this a 2-unit. I didn't. But the Ravens just 3-point favorites. I like the Chargers, Luch. They could be like even if they're up in the fourth quarter, they're going to charge the game away, right? And the Ravens will score a touchdown late. This is one of the more silly lines I think I've seen in recent memory. Like they're just such a better team defensively, and then they're also a better team offensively. And for them to just get 3, like the Ravens. And if you want to look ahead, Luch, guess what the Atlanta Falcons. Do you know who they're playing next week?
No.
They are playing. Oh my God, I forgot his name. Tim Boyle and the New York Jets. The New York Fighting Tim Boyles. And Atlanta is favored by how many points?
In Atlanta?
It's in New York.
In New York. 2.5.
It's 1.5, which it's like, this is ridiculous, right? So like, should be at least a field goal. Tim Boyle stinks. They couldn't move the ball until Miami just gave up in the second half and didn't even try to stop them. They just were limiting to like 4 and 5 yard throws on a 15-play drive to kill the clock, right? That's what good teams will do.
Is there a total for that game? What's the total? Is it like 34?
I don't know. I'm sure I can find it on
4.5.
Scores and Odds here real quick. Let's see. This week's game. So Scores and Odds is great, guys. You can find anything you want in just a matter of seconds if you subscribe. I don't know if there's the Black Friday sale is still going on, but we had one of those. Check your emails for that. Let's see here.
Ooh, Birds Niners next week.
Yeah, there's a couple good games.
The gauntlet schedule for the Eagles.
36.5. That seems about right. But I'd have the Falcons easily 3-point favorites. No Tim Boyle team should be even remotely close to
It's going to be one of the worst games of the year.
Yeah. Go Falcons. I threw that one up on a look ahead line. Anyway, guys, I hope you have a good Sunday. Hopefully your DFS teams do good. Your bets come in. Go Devontae Smith. Go everything on Scores and Odds. And we'll see you back here. Well, actually, I won't. I will not be here next week, so you'll have someone else here on Sunday. But someone will figure that out. For Andre, had some connection issues. Hopefully, he gets that fixed for his next show. Luch, it's been fun. Always love doing a show with you, man.
Yes,
Good
sir.
luck with the kittens. Good luck with DFS today. If you need any sports bets, head over to Scores and Odds and get them for the late games, buddy. Thanks to everybody for watching. I'm Brit, and we out you.